It's kind of a shame because we kind of had a very good
Okay.
ethical discussion there, didn't we?
Yeah. So we are live now. So we were talking a little bit before the stream actually started, but we are now live. Welcome to the Humane Mind live stream. I'm joined with
Hello,
Loudmouth today.
hello,
Uh,
everybody. I'm some
s-
loudmouth on the internet with an opinion, raiser of hell on this platform.
and Sinister should be joining us a little later on.
Okay.
Uh, I think he is at his son's soccer game at the moment, and he should be getting,
Okay.
yeah.
Not
So,
soccer game this time of year. Must
or
live in the deep south.
some kind of sports or something. He's got something after on Thursdays, and
See here, see
yeah.
here in Michigan, we're like in the middle of a fucking blizzard, man.
Oh, I think he's indoor soccer.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
So it's indoor soccer where they can play off of the walls and things like that. So that sounds actually kind of fun. But
Oh,
okay,
I know because there's like this indoor soccer ring just like a few couple miles from where I live. So yeah, I
yeah.
know those.
So hopefully he joins us later on. If not, then it's just me and Loudmouth. But we are going to continue breaking down the debate between Sargon and Spencer and Styx. So last time we got to about 1515, and Spencer was just complaining about that Sargon was talking about society that had never existed. So uh, I believe we touched on this uh, last week.
I
And I
think I
was like,
wasn't. I don't think I was present in the
yeah, yeah.
one Philip last week.
You were here for the first little bit of it, but it was mostly just me and Sinister because yeah, BTK was here, and see, I'm not sure if I should call BTK a he or a she. I'll have to ask them next time they're on a stream.
You're not sure?
I'm under the impression that they don't freaking care. So, um,
Wait, is BTK? What? Wait. I'm
base
sorry.
trainee Kayla, I think, is the name, the actual
So,
name.
so it's so based. So that person's a tranny. Okay.
Yeah, but
Uh,
like legitimate, as in the individual. Yeah, so BTK is born intersex and chooses to live as a woman.
okay.
That to me that makes sense. It's like, okay, you were born intersex, you have, you know, secondary female characteristics, but you're biologically a male. That's kind of like it's kind of like the, well, it's easier to continue to live as a woman because you look like a woman, but you're biologically male. You know, and as far as I know, there's no surgery or anything like that involved. But I don't
Uh,
know. Um, so
all right.
technically a man, so I think I should refer to BTK as he. I
I don't know.
that
That's
is
that's
yeah,
a
I
little
don't.
above my pay grade. Yeah.
That's why all this stuff is so confusing, and they're like, oh, it should be so simple and to just follow people, and you're like, how can you when it's, yeah, it's a convoluted mess. Anyway, but they were here, but they ended up dropping out because of internet connection. So it was just me and Sinister. And, we got through a good portion of it, unlike the first week when we got through like 5 minutes of it. So without further ado, I am going to play this.
Speak of the devil, and they shall appear.
Oh, okay. So Heavy Arms is here. Oh, there's BTK. Yeah, do you hear
Hello.
that? You are literally the devil now.
Yay.
Yay!
All right. Well, you are very quiet on my end. Let's see if I
Ah,
can
is
My
this
actually.
better?
yes, much better.
Okay.
Control room is not available. What?
I don't know where my
Oh.
mic condom went, so the little thing that makes it so that you can't hear my breath when I breathe on it. Yeah.
All right.
Uh,
So we were about 15 minutes and 15 seconds in, so I'm gonna keep playing the video from here. Let me know if you've got any audio issues with this.
First, I would just point out that it isn't possible to create a fully anarchic order. That would be true, but it is possible to constrain all possible forms of abuse and keep things preferably at a minimum. My question would be this: if we're looking at a civic structure, and Spencer, you pointed this out, and you're right when you point this out, and I would agree that the government of, like, the United States, for example, it starts wars and, kills people, murders, and does crazy things.
All right, I'm gonna stop him right there, and that is entirely why I think he just contradicts. So I like Styx's performance in this debate overall, but I think that right there kind of contradicts his earlier. Uh-oh. What is that? Oh, so apparently my video on my screen is saying that there's an error loading the app. Hopefully I can continue playing that and have it actually show up. Oh, okay, maybe not.
I'm just seeing that Thunderfoot just posted a 21-minute video about Kilroy. That ought to be interesting to watch after we're done here.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if Kilroy is still going on and if it's going to be as good as it was supposed to be.
I mean, but if you got to think, though, about Thunderfoot going after Kilroy, is that Kilroy's body is still cold, and he's going after it. What the hell?
Well, it's still going on, and technically Christina Hoff Sommers is still speaking there. I believe Styx is still going to be there. I mean, he was on their website last I saw.
I don't know if everyone got that joke, but never mind.
Oh, it's still cold, and he's. Oh, is it because of the Russian Deadpool? Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Okay. While the bodies are still cold.
Yes, so I did the joke.
Not even cold. Yeah.
While the bodies are still cold, yes.
Wait, is that what it's still cold? Wait, no, or not even cold yet. Wait, I don't. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute, one of those doesn't make sense. Anyway, did he actually say still cold?
Oh, the body isn't even cold yet. That was the phrase. But and I just said he's going after Kilroy while Kilroy's body isn't even cold yet.
Yeah.
All right, so that's not cool.
So, okay, back to the stream itself. So Styx starts off by saying he doesn't think an anarchic society could last, because that's what Spencer was kind of alluding, as if that's what Sargon wants, which, as to the best of my knowledge, Sargon is not an anarcho-capitalist or an anarcho-communist or anarcho-anything.
Not even close.
So Spencer was kind of setting up a straw man that he could fight of Sargon's position. He's like, oh, well, in what system has it ever occurred that it was entirely driven by the people, and which is what anarcho-capitalists think that their society will be, and I'm one of those, and which is part of the reason. And so Styx is elaborating on it by saying he doesn't think that is possible, but we can have a government that restrains itself. And I'm like, that is something that Styx just said, and then Spencer's argument would actually hold true if he applied it in the way of, in what society has that ever occurred? Because there has never been a government that hasn't grown too big for its britches. Like, all of these governments expand to the point that they ultimately collapse. I mean, the British Empire is probably one of the greatest examples of this, because there was a time when the British Empire controlled pretty much everything. It was like the sun doesn't set on the British Empire. They had colonies all over the globe, and it was too much for them to handle, and ultimately they collapsed, and now there's some tiny dinky island off the coast of Europe. That's the extent of the British Empire. It's just the UK. That's it. It used to be, they used to own everything. They used to own the U.S. colonies. They used to have colonies in South America, in Africa, in Japan, in India, all over the place. And now they're still a world superpower, but they're confined to their little island. So
no, they still have a few other areas. The Falkland Islands are still
a couple island colonies, and as far as I know, Australia is still its own independent country, but still somehow pledges allegiance to the UK.
Same as Canada.
And Canada is its own. Canada is its own country, and yet still follows the Parliament in the UK.
There's still a governor. There's still a governor appointed by the Queen to Canada.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
But they pretty much govern themselves independently.
Yeah. So, but they spread themselves too thin, and they became this huge bloated mass. And even in the United States, because Styx goes on to talk about the U.S., and it's like the U.S. was supposed to be a government by the people, for the people. We are a republic in nature, and that's what the Constitution establishes. It doesn't establish a democracy. And yet, the United States has turned into what he's later criticizing, a government that goes out of its bounds and starts wars and puts its people in danger for its own, for economic or political gain.
Anytime somebody argues with me as to what kind of government we have, I tell them to Google search CIA U.S. government type, and it'll pop up and take you to the CIA World Fact Book, and it says Constitutional Federal Republic.
Yeah. Well, I just think it was kind of funny that you mentioned the CIA, because, like, well, I know that the statistics are from the CIA, and the CIA is supposed to be...
I'm just making sure that they're, I'm getting that buzzword out there so that they listen in, you know.
Yeah, so they listen in. But if you're watching the recent stuff with the Trump investigation and with the documents that were released concerning JFK, it's like the CIA isn't always acting in the U.S.'s best interest. And they're actually, a lot of the times, acting against the U.S. Well, especially with, Operation Fast and Furious and the whole Benghazi issue.
Like I got a whole nother memo that, like, nobody knows about. That's, I think it's saved on my computer, but I might be able to access it on my phone. Actually, yeah, I can access it on my phone.
So, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, but that's the CIA going against the U.S. government, because they're supposed to be our agency, and yet they're continually doing things that kind of undermine the U.S. government in general. And if we're supposed to be a constitutional republic, the CIA kind of goes against the Constitution all the time.
The
CIA has no domestic authority.
The CIA basically is a federal enclave that's established.
Yeah, but if you look at the monitoring and all of that, the stuff that they were doing with that, this was what the Vault 9 leaks exposed, how they had all this wiretapping technology. They could tap into your cell phones, into your smart devices. They had all
NSA,
these.
Not the CIA.
No, this is the CIA. The Vault 9 stuff is talking about the CIA. So the NSA was authorized. The CIA was not authorized. So the NSA,
the CIA has no domestic authority.
They're still spying on the U.S. citizens, and
I fully believe it. I'm just saying that they have.
So that's what the Vault 9 leaks were talking about. They were talking about the CIA knew of bugs or flaws in hardware, like Samsung TVs, that they were using to exploit in order to tap into people without them knowing. And they were tapping into people's smartphones through these exploits. And they weren't notifying the manufacturers that those exploits exist, and they weren't notifying anybody that these exploits exist, because they were using it for their own personal gain. And then there was a leak at the CIA, and these flaws came out and became publicly known, or at least known in the deep web. And then this led to, what was that? There was a hack. What was it called? I can't remember what it was, but this was a huge problem. So hackers were using these CIA exploits to infiltrate people's computers and basically lock them out of their computer completely, and they were holding them for ransom. I forget, what was the name of that thing? They were holding people's computers for ransom and demanding payment in the form of Bitcoin, and they still haven't caught these guys yet. The only thing that saved them...
I know the group you're talking about.
Yeah, the only thing that stopped this from becoming a worldwide problem was they were all going to a domain, and one of these guys, or the guy bought the domain, or bought or something along those lines, and was able to cut off all traffic. So the blackmailers, or the people who were locking these people's computers, couldn't get access to... He basically kind of shut the door on them, so they could only... And they were able to make millions off of this, but they weren't able to make billions like they would have had he not stepped in. And this guy was a white hacker, trying to stop this. But anyway, it's a whole rabbit hole discussion, I guess, way off a topic. But it's interesting stuff to think that the U.S. was designed to keep these things from happening. The U.S. Constitution is designed to restrict the government from doing these sorts of things, and yet they continually happen. And so what Styx is alleging is that we can have a government that restricts itself, and yet no government in the history of mankind has ever restricted itself. So I'm not sure how you think we can get a minimalist government and keep it minimalist. So, and what the founding fathers actually thought is that from time to time, it's going to take the blood of patriots to renew the roots of the tree of liberty, right? That was
Thomas Jefferson quote.
Yeah, it's a butchered quote, but that's the essence of the quote. Yeah, the tree of liberty should be renewed with the blood of patriots, or something along those lines.
The blood of patriots and the blood of tyrants, for that is its manure, is the full quote.
Okay. Yes.
I'm kind of a nerd that way, and I study.
All right. Yeah. So, and that's so the idea was they knew that the minarchist government they had set up was not going to last, and that eventually it was going to get too big, and then the people were going to have to revolt, which is part of the reason why we have the Second Amendment. And so that way, when the government does try to encroach upon the freedoms of the people will fight back against the government, overthrow it, establish a new one, rinse, repeat, and this will go on indefinitely. So it was the understanding that we can only do so much to try to restrain a government, and then eventually a government's always going to get more and more power and build upon itself and try to do this imperialistic, build this empire that controls everything, and which is why the U.S. right now is the world's police force, and yet we have all of these non-state territories. Think about Guam, Puerto Rico, we've got military bases all over, and there are countries like South Korea. We don't technically own South Korea, but everybody kind of understands that South Korea, if anybody does anything to South Korea or they try to attempt anything, it's basically an attack on the U.S.
Well, that's because we're under a ceasefire, the war never ended.
Yeah. But I mean, and also we are in good trade relations with South Korea, and it's basically.
Thank you for Samsung.
Yeah,
That's it's kind of funny. The huge disparity between North and South Korea is kind of is kind of a good example to pull against race realism.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because the North and South Koreans are racially incredibly similar. They are have incredibly similar cultural history, and yet South Korea is one of the most prosperous countries on the planet. North Korea is the poorest country on Earth.
Yeah, and the most striking example of this is have you ever seen the maps of South Korea and North Korea at night?
Yes.
It's like that. I mean, it's funny, but it's also sad when you think about it. It's like North Korea is like dark. There's nothing, and then South Korea is this bright. I mean, it's like it looks like Las Vegas compared to the desert around it. And yet North Korea is this massive, or it still has millions of people in it. It's not a vacant area, but it looks like it might as well be.
Yeah, it's very sad, the situation. The whole country is just a hellish place to live. But the average Somali, and that country is just dirt poor, has a far better standard of living than the average North Korean.
Oh yeah, that's sad to really think about, because everybody's constantly bashing Somalia, and they're like, oh yeah, well, if you like anarchy so much, why don't you move to Somalia? And I'm like, that's not anarchy. That is multiple governments all fighting for hierarchy. There's so many tribes all fighting to be this, the government in charge. And the funny thing is, even at its terrible situation, Somalia is better off now than it was prior to their civil war, which is kind of really, really bizarre. Because there's actual, so I was reading this report recently where they were talking about there's medical care and access to things like that. So even though there's dirt poor and it's still a terrible situation, people that weren't able to get access to clean water are now getting access to clean water. People that weren't previously able to get medical care are getting medical care. So those are improvements, and also there's education improvements over the time when it was a solidified government, but it was under kind of a military tyrannical rule, which is why they did a revolt and civil war that fractured the country into. I think there are actually 3 or 4 different governments in Somalia. So there's the established government that the UN recognizes, run by Ethiopians, and then there's various tribal little sectors fighting against it, and they all hate the Ethiopians, and they hate the UN's government, and they're trying to set up their own governments, and then there's the whole piracy thing, which has mostly died down, but that's they were part of a revolt against the UN's government. So, but it's weird that despite all the terribleness there's some mild improvements to the living conditions of people in Somalia now, as opposed to when they had an intact, functional government. So, it's all right. Huge long side tangent, and that was only yay. We got the 30 seconds of the stream, and then we did 30 minutes of exposition. But yeah, the North and South Korea thing, I think, is a huge thing that I haven't heard anybody bring up when talking to Richard Spencer. And this is something that they should bring up when talking about the alt-right, is because genetically, North and South Korea, you can do the 23andMe test and you can't tell the difference between a North Korean and a South Korean.
Well, like I said, you'd have no argument. You'd have no argument I can destroy that argument. It's got absolutely nothing to do with whether or not it's race is real, and everything to do with authoritarianism holding them down. If you were to take people from North Korea and put them in South Korea, or the people from South Korea and put them in North Korea, the government will dictate, that the freedoms that they're allowed by the authoritarian government or that they're denied by the authoritarian government in North Korea would make a South Korean look like a regular old North Korean, and vice versa. If you take a heavily oppressed North Korean and you put them in South Korea, well, they'll probably get fat from eating food, but other than that, I mean, they're gonna adapt and they're.
All right, hang on a second. I got somebody knocking at the door.
Against that.
I'll be right back.
Well,
because that's all authoritarianism versus free government.
Yes.
Right.
All right. Thanks.
Hey, let me know when I get a phase.
Okay.
I mean, that'd be like saying, I got a black person in Africa, and I got their kid that I kidnapped and brought to America, and their kid's a freaking genius, and their mother doesn't even know what a wheel looks like. It's got nothing to do with race realism, and everything to do with environment.
That's what I thought it was.
Well, it does show though that kind of certain governmental and cultural factors often go into the wealth of nations far more than just the genetic
that out.
Than the genetic makeup of the people.
Yeah, if you're factoring out cultural influences, you're being intellectually dishonest.
Right.
However, if you try to go solely off of cultural influences and deny that race is real, then you're also being intellectually dishonest.
Well, in terms of whether or not race is real, okay, I mean, certainly it makes sense that
by race I mean Caucasoid, Mongoloid, and Negroid. I'm not talking like country specific. I'm talking those three scientifically they exist. Genetic variations in the human species.
There's more than just those three, right?
Yeah, there's so many more genetic variations in the human species. So that seems a little bit vague.
Well,
like there's no real definable subspecies within the human population at the moment. There used to be. I mean, you had let's say 500,000 years ago, you had subspecies such as Homo florensis, Homo sapien Neanderthal. All right.
Yeah, but you're talking a different level of the.
That's
a completely different level.
Yeah. So I mean, there are definite things that you can tell about the differences between groups of people when you're talking about race, and so this is something.
Like modern humans, sapiens and Neanderthals, we know that they did interbreed and they could produce viable young with each other.
Yeah.
So they weren't really separate species per se.
Yes.
All right. They were just kind of variation.
It's not species. It's race.
Yes.
The species is Homo sapien. That's the species. It's a bipedal, sexually dimorphic species.
Of ape, yes.
So the closest thing that I could think of that kind of more elaborates this would be like different dog breeds, because like
that is actually that's a good point. Like a pit bull and a beagle are both
dogs. They very different characteristics, but they could have pups together, and then you get these mixed breeds. So
Bagels are stupid.
well, and with dog breeds, the purebreds are usually genetic deformities that are bred into that, and then bulldogs was a really bad
about
example
dog
of that.
breeding. Yes, about dog breeding is that typically mixed breed dogs are genetically healthier than purebred dogs. In order to keep the lines pure, because in order to keep the lines pure, these breeders will often inbreed.
Yeah,
That's why anyone, if this, I want everyone to hear this. If you want to buy a dog for several $100s from a breeder instead of rescuing one, from a shelter, you're a fucking moron and an asshole. Okay.
yeah.
That's simple. And with the human populations, yes, there certainly are regional variations in human populations,
and,
right?
and this shows up
measurable ones for sure.
Yeah, and that shows up in your that's more than just the superficial facial, right? That's more than just the superficial skin color or facial features, because
true. Yes, like even with the dead bones, for example, if you find a decaying skeleton, forensic scientists can with 90% accuracy determine from the way the bones are shaped that this person in life was a Caucasian, this person in life was a black man of African descent, was an Asian man. You can actually tell that just from the bones without having any look at their skin whatsoever.
Yeah, that's what the Fox show Bones is actually based off of, the science behind that, and it's fairly accurate, especially when you're looking at human remains that are just bones.
Another big example, probably the biggest example of modern evolution in human populations, is certain people in Tibet whose ancestors have lived there for tens of thousands of years. It's been shown that they have a specific genetic mutation that allows them to breathe easier in thinner atmosphere because they live at such high altitudes than the vast majority of the human population can. This seems like provable proof of regional human variation, regional human evolution.
So that right there, I think that's kind of undeniable as far as that. The problem that Richard Spencer and the alt-right make is they assume culture and race are inseparable. That there's a correlation, but they're assuming the causation. They're like, oh, culture is caused by race, as opposed to race. Typically a specific race has a specific culture, but usually that's their family heritage, or that's where they grew up and that sort of thing. But you can change cultures. So culture has been shown to be independent of race, because I would say this. If you look at the southern United States, there are many former slaves, or the generations of children from former slaves that do not have cultures that resemble anything close to their African ancestors. So according to Richard Spencer, all these former slaves should have a culture that mirrors exactly like Nigerian or sub-Saharan African cultures, and you're like, no, they don't. They're their own separate culture. There's a hip hop community in the U.S. that is unique to the U.S.
And there's not a hip hop community in Nigeria.
No, and not even in like South Africa, where it's a little more urbanized or it's a little more industrial. It's not South America or South Africa is not a third world country. If anything, it's it's maybe on the border of a first world, but it's one of the most prosperous countries in Africa, and it's very industrialized in certain areas, and yet the black population in that doesn't suddenly turn into what we see in the U.S. According to Richard Spencer, we should see that, and yet we don't. Those are completely independent cultures.
Yes, that's the thing. You can acknowledge that there are regional variations in that race, to some limited extent, is real and biological. You can acknowledge that's the case, and you could still think that his idea for a white ethno-state is insane.
Yeah.
All right. I feel they're not mutually exclusive. You don't need to deny the science of race in order to refute Richard Spencer's ideas.
Which is what Kraut was trying to do, and you're like, why?
Yeah, and Kraut did a bad job. Yes.
It's like, I'm just going to refute race realism. I'm like, no, you're refuting the wrong area. There's too much statistic and obvious visual and historical accounts for the separations of races. I mean, there's too much evidence that races are unique and different. The area that the race realist and what Spencer is talking about is he's saying culture and race are intertwined and you can't separate the two and you can't switch cultures and you're inevitably, even if you, because of your race, you're inevitably going to have these cultural views. And he defeats that in his own argument when he's talking about white people. He's talking about, oh, I want a white ethno-state. And then he talks about how even in his white ethno-states, people won't have the same cultures or viewpoints. And you're like, then
what's the point?
What did you fix?
Then what's the... And let's also acknowledge the huge elephant in the room that a peaceful white ethno-state being established is impossible. If you were to like try to relocate all non-white people in America somewhere else, there'd be bloodshed. There would be lots of bloodshed over such a thing. There's no way such a thing could be done peacefully or ethically.
And why does he want to do that in the U.S.? That's what doesn't make any sense to me. It's because he already knows that he's fighting against the entire history of the U.S., the cultural norms of the U.S., and the governmental policies of the U.S. He could easily go to somewhere like Switzerland or Sweden, or, I mean, someplace, or one of these, Nordic countries where they already have a fairly homogenous population and try to get these views spread and established there. And then he'd have his white ethno-state, and all he'd have to do is change the government. Whereas here, he's fighting against cultural norms, he's fighting against families, he's fighting against religious organizations. If he was...
I'm all for a white and black ethno-state, mainly because black people won't be able to blame all their victimhood mentality crap on the white people, and white people won't be able to look at black people and go, but the crime rates. You remove the arguments from both.
Yeah, and this is part of what Sinister was talking about last week, because Richard Spencer was talking about establishing an authoritarian ethno-state. And he brought up some
didn't
points.
He also say he wanted a monarchy? Like,
yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, so what my brother pointed out is such a government would... I don't know, but such a government would violate the rights of its people and would impose, like, tyranny against the people. And so then, if he got his way, the people in Black Lives Matter would be happy. They're like, hey, finally the system is attacking white people, because that's all Richard Spencer's system would do. It's this huge bloated authoritarian government that it can only attack white people. It can't attack black people because there's no black people in the government or in the society. So it's going to oppress white people. It's like, isn't that kind of what you guys wanted? It's like the white supremacists and the black supremacists seem to want the same thing.
You find that horseshoe theory right there, okay?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, if you continue on your ideology, the black supremacists are going to get what they want. They want a system where they're not oppressed and where white people are oppressed, and they'll get that if they're not a part of the white ethno-state. All right, let's see if we can get a little bit more through this. It's already 6:30. All right. Oh, wrong tab. No wonder why I couldn't hit that play button.
If you were to attempt, if you're looking at groups of people as having rights, how would you institute specifically like a white identitarian U.S. or a super state? I think you've mentioned like North America becoming an ethno-state. Let's just simplify it, the U.S. How would you implement that without then disabusing large groups of people who are already under the civic structure considered citizens, but happen not to be white? Or how would you disabuse them of that status and push them out physically, or sort of make them be lepers within the state without abusing them under that civic structure? And combined with that, how would you then, because you're talking about pragmatism, I take it, when you're talking about living reality, how would you do that without causing so much untold bloodshed? Like, one of the things you've spoken of is, hey, I want identitarianism, but it's a kinder, gentler, it's not Hitler. We're not going to purge people. We're trying to make this, easy, and I'm not trying to hurt people. How would you do it without hurting people who dissented, including a lot of white people? And some of those people, I've pointed this out even with regards like MAGA populism. Now, I support deporting criminal illegals. But if you were to try to deport the so-called 30 million people identitarians keep telling me, it would require the suspension of the Constitution. It would cause a civil war. Half of Texas alone would probably take up arms because you'd have to go door to door, suspend the Second Amendment, suspend the right to privacy. How would you actually implement that without becoming so monumentally abusive that the U.S. or whatever ethno-state that was trying to prop up becomes a pariah and gets shut out?
All right, it's gone on a little too long without saying anything there, because he could have ended it at the first question, and then he goes on to elaborate and basically throw two more questions on there. He should have allowed for Richard Spencer to kind of tackle them one at a time, but I think he kept going because he knows Richard Spencer would have kind of addressed the first question as if that solves all kinds of these issues that come up. And what Richard Spencer is going to go on is, actually answer these, and he's answered these on several podcasts and several interviews in the same kind of manner, which is like, oh, we could just entice them, and eventually they would give up and they would willingly leave. So that's kind of a utopianist,
That's absolutely fucking ridiculous.
it's like a childlike naivety when he's applying this in this situation. He's like, yes.
Yeah.
So he keeps saying if we give them an incentive to leave, they will leave. So if we remove citizenship and if we say, hey, we'll pay your fee to leave and we'll give you some place to go to and establish a new life there, as if there won't be stubborn people. Because it's like he's assuming, yes.
There would be bloodshed. There absolutely would be bloodshed right over such a thing.
All it takes is a few people saying, no, we won't do this. No matter how, we won't be bought, we won't be sold, we're here to stay. This is where my grandparents grew up, this is where my family, this is all I've ever known. You can't make me go to a different country. He's going to have people like that. And he's going to have the white people that he wants in his ethno-state to fight for them. And say, no, they shouldn't have to leave. So that's what Styx is getting at here, and he's kind of preempting.
I think what is it that Sargon really went a lot on who's white and who's not, because where do mixed race people fit in his white ethno-state?
Richard Spencer doesn't have a clear definition to that. He just said, oh, it's obvious what the difference is between white and non-whites. That was his answer throughout the entire stream.
Well, it's not really, It's not at all.
No,
but
he keeps claiming it is, and yet it's not. Because is Sean King, is he black or white? He doesn't even know.
Really.
He doesn't know. If you don't know if you are black or white, like if there's people who don't know which one.
Am I Arabic? Because I have a little Arabic in me. Do I fit? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. So he doesn't have a clear distinction, and this is something Sargon pointed out, and I think this was a correct point, although it kind of it made the conversation or the debate go a little kind of haywire and get focused on personal attacks as opposed to the issue. But I think the issue he pointed out was valid in that in your white ethno-state, you are going to have hierarchies based on how pure your ethnicity is. How pure your white or being white is in Richard Spencer's, ethno-state. It's like, oh, well, I'm pure blood white, so then, you don't get to talk to me because you're a mix. You have so much, you've got 10% Cherokee, like, what's her name, Senator Warren, because she claimed to be Indian. Hey, white ethno-state, I'm sorry, you're just lower on the hierarchy. You're not...
Yes, Senator Fraudahantis, so we know.
Yeah, well, you claim to be Native American. Sorry, you're not pure white. You don't get the top spot.
Yes.
In his world, eventually that will happen. Is people will start separating based on their whiteness purity, and you will
have you ever seen a mockumentary movie called The Confederate States of America?
Yes, I have.
And how would that? Yeah, the way one of the plot points of that program is that in this alternate reality, people are like DNA tested to see if they're pure white enough. One scene, the mock of the Clinton scandal, when he's accused of having slave blood, and he says, "My great grandfather did not have sexual relations with that woman," which is probably the funniest part of that movie. movie. That was actually
Well, no,
really
I think
brilliant piece of dark satire right there.
no, I think the funniest piece that I saw was the toothpaste, and I think this was an actual commercial from or an actual advertisement where they're talking about the toothpaste. Yeah, it was an actual tagline from a toothpaste ad, right?
No. The commercials are all fake. The racist commercials, but many of them are actually based on real products that did exist, like various racist products from the early 20th century. A lot of those racist products did exist, all right, but those commercials themselves, they are all entirely fake.
Okay.
That's part of
because there was a line in there that I just busted up laughing. I'm like, dude, I can't believe they put this. Well, because the film is made by a black director, and it's about it's about talking about if the South had won. I mean, it's essentially what would happen.
Yeah,
so he was assuming that he's assuming that all these institutions would still keep going, and this is it's a satire. But I think that was the funniest line in the whole film was this toothpaste will get your teeth jigaboo white, and I'm like, holy crap! Did they just say that?
Yeah, that was pretty funny. And another was the spoof of Cops. Called Runaways. And the spoof of the Cops theme song.
Yeah.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do? What you gonna do when we find you? Yes, I'm like, holy shit. This is so fucked up.
It was so over the top, and that's why I was like, oh, dude, this is like I don't like the film because the overall premise is flawed, but it's
definitely very politically left wing in terms of its message.
Yeah, but as a piece of satire, it is actually pretty funny. I mean, it's got very laugh out loud and just shock moments. You're like, dude, I can't believe they put this in this movie.
It's extreme dark humor, satire.
Yeah,
it's very dark.
Yeah. So I mean, and
kind of shocked at the same time while you laugh.
And I had to mention, okay, so the director of it was black, but I wonder if the director had been any other race, if any of that would, I mean, that film would have gotten lambasted, right? It would have been, instead it was praised, right? It was, it was like, because I remember when it came out.
Well, it was made on essentially no budget, though. He basically put it together.
Yeah, but it was still, I mean, it was like it was kind of a, the only reason I had heard about it is because it was all over the news. I mean, talking about this film coming out in the next, whatever.
Like an example of it took like stock footage of race riots from the 70s, but the narrator would refer to them as slave revolts. Yes. So that's kind of a cheap way of adding your footage on a
So it was a fairly low budget film, but I remember reading about it in papers and online and all that sort of thing. But had it been a white director, or just anybody who wasn't black, people had been like, "Oh, this is terrible. This is such a racist film." And they're like, "Oh," but instead it's the other way around. They're like, "Oh, well, it's okay. Now we get that it's satire." And I think that's something that's kind of lost.
I think it's pretty obvious, regardless, that the movie's satire.
Yeah,
I mean,
it should be.
Like, what is it? Another one about the Cartwright Institute. Well, that is actually a very clever joke because Samuel Cartwright wrote these various racist psychiatric articles saying that that slaves who tried to escape suffered from various mental illnesses, which So he basically creates a fictional school in this alternate reality called the Cartwright Center for Freedom Illnesses. All right, but in this alternate reality, it's actually a fucking school was founded by him. That's that works into the modern day.
Yeah. It's naturally that wouldn't have happened. So that's why I say it's kind of flawed in its premise, but it's taking taking things that they were and kind of exaggerating them. So
for one thing, the whole idea that if the South had won the Civil War, that they would have conquered the North as opposed to separating from the Union is fucking ridiculous. The North had 3 times the free man population as the South. They had a vastly superior industrial complex, and their navy was insanely superior. The South didn't even have a navy. Okay, the idea that they could have just conquered the North if they had just gotten a few extra foreign aid is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Not to mention, no, slavery would not have lasted into the 21st century.
No,
It would have
if it had, we wouldn't have had the technology.
Yeah.
We,
First of all, modern industrialization would have made slave labor completely unnecessary. All right, and the idea that like every house in America would have their own personal slave is fucking retarded. Even back in the day, only 10% of the population in the South ever were slaveholders. So yeah, pretty much the whole movie is absolutely ridiculous. All right, as a legitimate alternative history, but as a satire, it is kind of clever. You just view it as a satire.
And so this is something that I just heard like within the past month or so, or maybe it was a little bit further ago, but talking about in ancient Greece, like the Greek Republic, they knew about a steam engine. They could have made steam engines back then. They chose not to because they had slave labor. And so the institution of slavery actually delayed the Industrial Revolution because the steam engine was the main driving force behind the Industrial Revolution. Once you had the steam engine, then you have all these other kinds of combustion engines and all kinds of machinery that exploded.
A slave economy is a stagnant economy. All right.
Slavery
is not. That's the conundrum of slavery. It's not just immoral; it's economically inefficient.
Yeah.
All right. Having a workforce that constantly wants to escape makes about as much sense as building up. It makes about as much sense, okay, as putting a pair of legs onto your washing machine so you can chase it around the room every time you want to wash your clothes. Okay, it makes far more sense to have a workforce that voluntarily comes to work with moderate wages.
All right? Think of how much money and how much time was wasted because they had to have overseers to keep people in line. Like people just standing around with whips, looking mad and waiting for somebody to step out of line.
Or not to mention the fact that the government had the resources to catch fugitives. Okay, all that wasted money. Okay, that could have just been used to hire free hands, which would have been massively more moral and massively more economically efficient.
And like you were talking about, that's precisely the reason you saw the North being so much more advanced than the South.
They were. Their industrial base was massively superior.
Yeah, because they didn't have to rely on, or they couldn't rely on slave labor, and so they resorted to other things of, oh, hey, we can actually innovate, we can actually do things instead of relying on this arbitrary, or this, I guess, maybe arbitrary is not the right word, but this institution that is actually inefficient. We can actually push for efficient machinery and efficient systems, and they boomed. And the South is kind of still slow and was still in that purely agricultural mindset, whereas the North had already industrialized like the vast majority of it.
Yes.
And today, like now we
have machines that do work that thousands of hands in the field.
Yeah, and like one the South is literalism, so.
Yes, so the idea that slavery would ever be needed in a modern society is ridiculous.
All right. Okay. And again, we probably went too long on that tangent.
Okay.
Yeah, but let's try to keep the video going. I just wanted to. So I think Styx was actually preempting some of Spencer's earlier answers to this question, saying, "Well, you're not considering this. You're not considering this. You're not considering this. So your answer has to account for all of these things." And I don't think Richard Spencer even does a good job of still accounting for them.
By the entire rest of the world falls into chaos and becomes basically third world, because then what's the point? It's not a prosperous, white, happy utopia like I guess you envision. It becomes basically a slum. It becomes way worse than it was before in any possible sense of the word.
Well, first I would say that the ethno-state is an ideal in the sense that the ethno-state, as I have defined it, does not exist right now.
No shit, asshole.
Yeah, okay, but so this is the thing that I don't understand what he's talking about in the ethno-state.
That's like me writing a book talking about an ideal society where everyone uses teleporters to work, okay? And then saying, yes, we don't have the teleporters today, but it's an ideal to have teleporters teleport every man to work every day. So, yeah.
Yeah, And so the thing that he's talking about is there is no ethno-state today, and I'm like, but I thought you guys were citing like the Nordic countries as kind of your template. If your idea made sense and actually achieved the results that you think it will, shouldn't those countries that are already predominantly the same racial makeup, shouldn't they be accelerating past the United States right now?
Japan's another big example. Japan is like 98% ethnically Japanese. There are whites and blacks that are there who have Japanese
citizenship. But I mean, you're talking about less than 10% of the population.
Less than 2% of the population.
Yeah, it is extremely small. I mean, it's still
very ethnically homogenous country. Yeah. Yes, like I heard from this one guy who visited Japan. This black guy, he said, they look at you weird because a lot of them like never seen a black guy in person because there's so few of them in Japan."
Yeah, and so if Spencer's idea of an ethno-state, even if he says there is no true ethno-state, what you would see in those countries that are already 90+% white is they would have all of the benefits that Spencer claims would occur in the United States if we went to a population that was 90% white or was majority white, like because I mean, it was still majority white, like 70% of the population, or if it's not 70%, it's still in the high 60s. A percent is white in the United States. So if his idea of an ethno-state is like, oh, we just need to get back up to 80% plus, and I'm like, well, there's already countries that have 80% plus. And they're not seeing this amazing revolution like what you claim to say will happen if we make the U.S. predominantly white. It's like, so the proof behind your claim already, Richard, is not really visible in the real world. So it might be that, oh, this is your ideal scenario, but your ideal doesn't match what we see in reality. So it's a flawed ideal. It's like the communists saying, oh, well, our ideal is a truly communist society where there is no money and everything is perfect. And I'm like, well, your ideal hasn't seemed, or nothing ever seems to get close to that. You keep building up all the foundations that you say you need to have, and they keep falling apart, and they keep going to completely the opposite of what you claim to want every time. So you can't still say, but they haven't reached our ideal. They haven't reached it. I'm like, how can you claim that they ever would? And Richard,
yeah, it seems like utopianism, like sounds like a radical socialist who says, "Oh, real socialism has never been tried." It comes across the same bullshit, except from different side of the aisle.
No, I don't think he's on the different side. I think Richard Spencer's on the left and either doesn't realize it or claims to be on the right. So
that's kind of the case. I remember in his interview with Roaming, she kept saying, "You're the left of me on so many things." Yeah. I do remember that. That was kind of a very, very telling moment.
All right, let's get to the rest of his answer here.
There are many states around the world that are ethno-statish, you could say. Poland is a kind of ethno-state. There are plenty of ethno-states in the third world.
What?
In which you have
ethno-states in the third world.
Poland is not an ethno-state, you fucking moron. God damn it.
Well, he just said that there are plenty of ethno-states in the third world, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, why would you want to be like the third world? So you want to go from a first world to a third world? God,
yeah. It's like, wait a minute.
I swear, this guy has a very punchable face. I don't know, something about her. Okay.
Well, I'm surprised that people aren't constantly calling him out on these things, because, I mean...
Yes. I almost understand why now.
He contradicts himself so much in his own answers, and people just kind of let it slide, and I'm like... I mean, that's the entire purpose why I'm breaking it down in these several streams is this is such an easy argument to knock down and refute in his whole entire position. And it seems like so many people are struggling with it. And I'm like, really? Because, I mean, he's still somewhat dominant, or, I mean, maybe not dominant, but still recognizable in all these political spheres. And I'm like, how? This guy...
because bullshitting Brooks said he was an actual smart person.
an actual smart person.
To be fair, compared to Brooks, that's true.
Yeah. All right.
Compared to him, everyone's a smart person.
Okay, I'm gonna let him continue his answer here.
Effectively.
Okay.
And yes, they're citizens, and yes, there's a kind of abstract democratic element to it, but there's also a spiritual and racial element to the composition of the state. So that kind of ethno-state is actually not terribly unusual. We have plenty of existing examples. Israel might be the most famous. Israel actually is a kind of model for an ethno-state that I would want for the white race in the future, in the sense that a Jew from around the world, even one that doesn't have any direct connection with the state of Israel, has a right of return to Israel. He has a home. And
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I'm not entirely sure about this with the Jewish religion or the Jewish ethnicity, but to my understanding, and this is something I was just watching the Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson on Rubin, their most recent sit down with him, and Ben Shapiro was talking about this, how in Judaism there are the ethnic Jews, and then there's the religion of Judaism. And you can convert into being a Jew, but if your mother was Jewish, you will be a Jew for life, even if you're not a practicing Jew. So I think with Israel, the heritage part of being a Jew does apply. Yes, if your heritage is Jewish, then you can go to Israel and you can claim that as your homeland. And I mean, you still have to file paperwork and all this sort of thing, and you still have to go through the customs and get your passport and get recognized, and you can eventually get citizenship in Israel. But I'm not sure how that exactly works with the people who convert to Judaism, because technically they would be a Jew, and if their wife also is a practicing Jew and converts to it, then she would be a Jew, and then your children would be ethnically Jewish. Which that doesn't quite make sense for me, but even if the mom and dad wouldn't be accepted into Israel because they're not heretically, is that the right word? I think that's the right word. But they don't have that same Jewish heritage, but their kids would. Would they? I mean, so I'm a little confused as to how he thinks that the racial makeup of Israel is homogenous when there are converts. I don't know if they're actually treated the same, or I don't know the exact details when it comes to Israel, but I do know that there are converts to Judaism who live in Israel. And as far as I know, Israel is pretty lax on a lot of things that Spencer would want more an authoritarian stance on.
They're not a monarchy, for example. King David doesn't rule there anymore.
Yeah, they're not a monarchy, and they allow pride parades and are actually pretty open to having other people from other cultures and other countries come in and live there. And
another thing about it is 20% of Israel's population are Arabs. Okay, many of them. All right, and other religions are allowed to be practiced, and non-ethnically Jewish people are able to get citizenship. So Spencer's again full of shit.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to, long-windedly trying to get to, is there's people who are Jewish citizens of Israel who aren't Jewish, or who aren't the same race as what he considers the Jewish ethno-state. And you're like, they're still citizens just the same as anybody else. So his argument there's again falls flat, and people don't quite call him on it.
My concept, and it's not just mine. There are many predecessors to me in terms of thinking about this. In terms of the concept of the ethno-state, there would be a right of return for all whites. So it would have a civic order, but it would also, citizenship would be ultimately racially defined. I will go into all the things. I will go into all of this.
Yeah, and so this is something I brought up previously, but right now this is just the thing he either fails to see or fails to think about, Okay, you know what a redneck is, right? Or trailer trash, white bread, cracker.
I'm familiar.
Hillbilly. Those are the types of people that Richard Spencer does not consider when he's talking about his white ethno state. Because he's thinking, oh, I would rather have somebody who drinks beer all day, sits around on their front lawn in a wife beater with their car up on cinder blocks. I would rather have him in my society than someone like Thomas Sowell. That is what Richard Spencer. That is what Richard Spencer's utopia is. Hey, you're white. Yeah, come on in.
Here's another. Okay, that's another issue. Okay, they often point out that of genetic IQ variance between the races. Okay, but average IQs do not apply to every single individual. So if you just want a society that's smarter, why would you exclude black intellectuals, but let in white college, high school dropouts and hillbillies? That makes no sense.
And it's like he assumes that white people aren't members of gangs and aren't high school dropouts or aren't in our prison system.
No, are you kidding? Every white person is building rockets to fly to Mars as we speak. That's what I do every day in my basement. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm fucking do that while I'm doing James Bond missions into various countries. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually working on the universal theory of everything in my spare time. Sorry, never mind. I'm not actually white.
No, you're not. 42. You are not nearly white enough, HUMANe, to figure out the universal theory of everything. I apologize.
Hey, wait. Who was that? Somebody said something. Was that BTK or was that you?
That was BTK.
I said 42.
42, yeah.
Yeah. That is the theory of everything, right?
That is the ultimate answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to figure out is the actual question. Yeah.
Yes, the question is what you need to figure out.
But I'm not white enough for Richard's ethno state because I am mixed. So the other thing is I'm not even sure if I qualify as white because I'm technically Greek and Korean, but I'm like Cypriotic Greek. So from the island of so most of my family's from Cyprus. I don't think that qualifies as white because there's two ethnicities when it comes to Greece.
I'm mostly a Greek myself, so I definitely don't qualify as white if that's not what the qualifier.
Yeah. So because if you look at pictures of my family in Cyprus, they're indistinguishable from Arabs or from people from the Middle East. Whereas there's actual other people from Greece who look like Italians. So my family is the side that looks more like more like people from Northern Africa. I'm like, oh. Yeah, when I actually if I were to get a tan and grow out my beard, you'd probably so this is something my uncle actually he grows out his beard and he gets really dark because he tans a lot and that sort of thing, and he gets stopped nearly every time he goes through the TSA airport. Because they're like, wait a minute, hey, I'm all for profiling, and but when we get dark and when we get so he's more Greek than I am, obviously, because he's not a part Korean, but so I'm kind of like I'm pretty sure I don't qualify as white on Richard Spencer's scale, and yet everybody on Twitter calls me white boy. So
according to the average social justice warrior, I have privilege coming out of my nose and my asshole every day.
Yeah, but according to Spencer, it's also should be obvious if I'm white or not. And I'm like, well, how? I don't even know.
Such bullshit.
I don't know if I qualify as white or Caucasian. I think actually I'm predominantly Korean. If you're talking about the racial makeup, I know I'm at least a quarter Korean. I don't think I'm quite a quarter Greek, and then everything else is just kind of tenths and eighths, and who cares? It's such a small percentage it doesn't really matter.
I beat the system. I traded in my white male privilege for the tranny oppression. I'm still waiting for my oppression though. Damn it!
You're still waiting for your gold medal.
fucking Riley G. Dumbass was all like, it's harder, or no, it was Blair White that was like, it's harder to tell my family that I'm a conservative than it is to be trans. I'm like, it's not hard to be either, you fucking moron.
I don't know. I mean, going through all those surgeries and spending thousands of dollars.
Well, that's the thing is,
probably...
apparently you don't need to do any of that. So I mean, I don't know if you've been watching Owen
Well,
McDonald and his
Blair
followers.
White did. Well, Blair White did though. Blair
Yeah.
White went all these facial reconstruction surgeries
Yeah.
to look more feminine.
But if you're following some of these tweets by the extreme left social justice warriors, apparently all you need to do is claim you're intersex, or claim you are claim you're the opposite gender, or claim that you are from birth the opposite gender. So, or this gender, even if you don't like. So according to them, I can just say I'm a woman and now I'm trans. Hey, sorry, yes. BTK. I'm gonna beat you in the oppression Olympics because I'm just gonna claim whatever I need to win.
I don't give a shit. I already got the Oppression Olympics t-shirt from Free Press Kyrgyzstan.
Alright. Okay, let's continue on with this video, so hopefully we don't spend
did you get the DM I sent you?
Oh, no, I think I closed out Twitter, but I will check it in a second here.
I would just have to remark, though, that couldn't that be problematic? Because one thing that we see in Israel is they have a problem with, like, white nationalists who have a Jewish grandparent going there and Nazifying things. That's actually been something that's happened before. What would you say? What about you? You'll have to maintain a civic structure regardless, I would assume. It can't just be racialist, like, hey, we're a giant white tribe. What about your fans, and some of them do? What about those who say, well, Italians aren't really white, so we're not going to let them in? This Turk who's got like 7 white great-grandparents, screw them. This person's a Hapa. That person, they have like, their features are just too dark for some congenital reason.
Yeah, what you're saying.
You're talking about autism, but you have to design this weird categorical system. It's not so cut and dry as, hey, you're a citizen, or hey, you're not on a civic basis.
There's a core stock to the white race.
What?
There's a core stock to the white race, and how everybody on the stream didn't just bust out laughing when he said that, I have no idea.
A core stock to the white race. What the fuck does that mean?
I don't know. That is a made up fairy tale that he's got in his head. Because I mean, like, so you've got Styx, Sargon, JF, and Warski. I think Warski's white. Maybe he's Jewish. I don't know. Warski sounds like a Jewish name, but I know that's not his real name. But those, everybody on this stream, that's not his actual name, or at least that's what he claims. But 5 people on this stream who are all white, according to Spencer. What do they have in common? I mean, other than that they're mostly YouTube personalities, what is the stock between them? They all have different political views. I mean, Sargon and Styx overlap, and I'd say Warski overlaps as well, but Richard Spencer and JF overlap, but they seem on the completely opposite side to the other 3, and it's like, well, and as far as I know, none of them have the same religion or belief systems. They're all different enough to warrant a debate between them.
I assume all of them are atheists, right?
Well, Styx is not atheist. He's talked about being a pagan. I think Sargon, I think most of the rest of them are atheists.
Sargon's definitely an atheist, I know that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Warski. Or JF though, but I'm gonna assume
JF's definitely an atheist as well. I'm not sure about Warski,
but Styx has talked about being pagan, and he talked about that at the beginning of this stream. Not liking the label associated with pagan, but that seems to be what he's stated previously about his religious beliefs. I don't know what that means. That just means
I've never watched Styx, so I don't know much about him.
So, but all 5 of them, well, I mean, Warski and JF are supposed to be mostly acting as moderators, but the 5 of them have differing viewpoints on this topic completely. So what stock is he talking about? And it's just, is just really, really. He keeps saying that it's obvious, and you don't need to make these. You're getting lost in the details, and you don't need to make these distinctions. And like, you're the one requiring these distinctions.
Yeah, you're the one proposing a massive ethno-state. So
you're gonna
really got to be able to define who belongs and who doesn't.
You need to draw a line somewhere, and you're not willing to draw that line. So,
or we could possibly have a society where people of different races are given equal citizenship. But that would be a very interesting idea, kind of like the society in all Western countries.
All right, I'm gonna pause it a little bit here to read over some of these super chats. So I'm trying to see if there's any actual questions here.
Super chats? You don't have super chats.
Sorry, not super chats. The live chats. Yeah, not super chats. Well, they're super that anybody's actually in this stream watching.
they're all super people. I know
you're all super to me.
Super. Yes, to me they are all super.
Okay, when you think it's proper to respond to my question, what do you think of my Owen McDonald meltdown video? Okay, we actually talked about that prior to going live on this, and I brought this up. So,
you mentioned the fact that I used kind of a DM conversation. Well, S-Man did first, and I used it, repurposed it in my video between me, S-Man, and No Bullshit. Okay, in ones, but and no one had a problem. And then when Owen McDonald reposts some stuff in the group chat, it kind of people did have a problem, and like, that does seem a little hypocritical,
Yeah, so that's my so I think that the no BS, yes, that was clearly a rightful use of that in order to make a case against him and to point out how he says one thing in private and he'll say other things in public. That is the...
Well, to point out two things about
he's two-faced in that he's lying all over the place and he's denying that he said certain things when he has said them.
Well, that, not only the fact that he lied about saying those things, but more importantly than that, he today is done a complete 180 on the issue of doxing, and he seems to get off falsely accusing his critics of doxing as if doxing is something bad, okay? While at the same time he was defending a real doxer, a true doxer in Devin Tracy. So, all right, that is so massively hypocritical. It's not just hypocritical, he's slandering these people to do so. All right,
yeah.
When he falsely accuses all these people who just criticized him of doxing.
Yeah, so for the most part, I agreed with your video about Owen, and I actually gave it a like. I didn't comment on it, but I think I think he went overboard because, like, I don't, as far as I know, I don't think I was defending Ham itself. And after looking at what he originally said, I'm like, oh, well, I don't think there's any way that he could have said that to not be unintentionally racist, because it seemed like the only reason to say that insult in that context would be because Owen is black. And so you're like, okay, I'm only using this insult because you are black, and it's not because of anything else that you've done. It's just because of your skin color, in which case that makes it racist. But when Owen is trying to say any use of that word is inherently racist, and you're like, no, I don't think so. There's definitely cases where it makes sense to use the term when it applies to an individual or a group of individuals.
Hold on. As Zach's saying, the difference is that Ham didn't conduct any criminal activity by calling Owen the N-word. Well, I don't know. Is no bullshit lying on the stream really a crime? Not really. No. It's scummy. It's despicable, but it's not really a crime. He didn't. I don't know. I guess him falsely accusing others of doxing, that could be a crime. That could be slander if the people he were accusing were to, like, bring a defamation suit against him. But even that's a bit tenuous.
Yeah. So to my and this is what I told Loudmouth before the stream started, is never say anything in private that you would not want to be made public. So everything that I say in public or private, I don't care if the entire world knows that I've said it. That should always be your case. So the uproar about, oh, how dare he make that or private conversation public seems kind of like a nitpick to me. I think the more egregious thing was he's saying, you use this word, therefore you're always racist and you hate black people. And you're like, whoa. No, that's...
Owen's reaction was over the top, but Ham was a prick.
Yeah.
Just kind of started off.
Ham was a prick, Ham was an asshole, but that doesn't make Ham a hillbilly or a redneck. That's...
Well,
right? Because that's essentially the same kind of insult. You're like, oh, Ham was an asshole, therefore he's a redneck. And you're like, no, redneck is talking about a specific group of people. And which is why so I was trying to explain that you can use words in their context, and I ended up, and this is part of the reason why I'm currently restricted on Twitter for 7 days, is I was talking about various words and their practical dictionary definition. I was talking about the word retard, and how you can use the word retard because it is a medical term. That's what it was originally used for, was to talk about someone with an IQ below 70. That was the term. And then people started using it as a pejorative to describe... Yeah. And this is part of an Owen Benjamin skit that I recently listened to and actually looked. I'm like, oh, dude, he's right on this. Idiot used to be a clinical diagnosis of. I think it's
idiot is still a clinical diagnosis. Well,
yeah,
an idiot literally is an adult who's mentally inferior to a child of 3.
Yes.
So it's an adult who's extremely mentally limited.
Yeah, and stupid as well. Stupid is also falls. It's an IQ range, and so. People use, you can't say retard, you can't call anybody a retard, but you can call someone stupid, you can call someone an idiot, and you're like, what's the difference?
Why?
They're all...
No, there's not.
They're all... That you're saying someone who is supposed to have a regular or normal range of IQ is acting like someone who has a subnormal IQ, or IQ that's below the standard deviation, which is typically what retard falls into. It's your 2 standard deviations below the average. So you're saying, hey, you should have an average or close to average IQ, and you're acting like someone who's 2 standard deviations below that. That's why it's an insult. But, and so I was explaining these definitions, and then people were, oh, how dare you say these words on Twitter? And I'm like, and Twitter's like, oh, how dare you say these words on Twitter? I'm like, what group was I violent against? What group was I saying be violent towards? I listed the definition.
Twitter is very censorship happy. No doubt. It's easy to get banned.
Yeah, I put links. I put links to the definition and quoted parts of the definition, and that's what I got banned for. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with Twitter? And I quoted back to them their exact policy, and I'm like,
you're banned on Twitter? What? How'd you send this message?
So I cannot tweet, subscribe, or follow anybody. The only thing I can do is DMs. And it has to be a DM to someone who is either currently following me or a group that I'm already a part of. I cannot establish new DMs, and I cannot... And it's like, dude...
How long?
For 6 more days. And I'm like, I was explaining definitions. I didn't say anything about a particular individual, about a particular group. But nope.
No.
Twitter can't have that. So
Twitter,
I was using it in a purely academic point, and that's what, Anyway.
Yeah, like I lost my Steve Shives parody account for less than that, so who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Loudmouth is a smart guy, valuable on YouTube. I don't know. It sounds like you're being kind of sarcastic there. Let's see. So what's your take on this debate? I'm looking for actual questions here or actual points. But holy crap, I let these go way too long. Entice them to leave how? He's gone on to that. He's talked about that in other debates, talking about like either financial incentive or restricting their permissions in a society to the point where they have like no other option but to leave. Like the inability to buy property is probably pretty huge because that locks somebody into staying in one particular area, and if they're unable to get work and all that sort of thing, well then it's going to get to the point where, okay, I can't buy any property, I'm stuck in this one house, I can't go live anywhere else, no one's going to hire me, so I can't keep paying for my house. I can't keep paying for utilities and for food. I'm just going to have to, bite the bullet, sell the house, and leave. That's what he thinks will happen, and he thinks that will happen in a peaceful manner. And yet, how well did that work out for the Native American population when we're like, oh, hey, we're just going to move you to these reservations. We're going to do this peacefully, right? That was...
Yeah, there'd be all kinds of violent resistance.
We managed that so peacefully, right? I mean, there's the Trail of Tears. That would never happen in the modern world, right? Except for when it does happen in the... So he has this weird notion that will happen, and you're like, nah, it's... Okay. Let me make sure I didn't miss any other good points here. Yes, Israel does have a good portion of Arabs in it. I didn't realize it was that much. I thought it was closer to like 5% or something like that, but...
it's like 20% close to it.
Yeah, it's because there's entire regions that are Arab populations because they claim that as... And they're trying to make those part of the Palestine state or Palestinian state. They're trying to reclaim those sections of Israel for Palestine, whatever Palestine is. Because that isn't clearly defined either, from everything I can see. Yeah, and Google it is in the chat. Stalking Zach Moore.
Yes, a lot. Yeah, I don't know. Google it's like icon just makes me laugh every time I see it. I just can't. That face, it's just too much, man. I just can't get over what that guy looks like.
Yeah, okay, so, and Baphomet brings up this, my father was a white Hispanic and my mother was white, do I get to stay? Well, according to Richard Spencer, as long as you look like you're white and it's obvious that you're white, then you get to stay. And as long as they don't, like, hey, wait a minute, are you really white, and do a blood test or, kind of a DNA test, they would never know. And then you can go on and you can do whatever you want in their society because you pass as white. So you could, if you wanted to, you could be a gang member or be a mooch off of their welfare system or, be a complete drag on society. And that's okay as long as you're white and as long as they think you're white. Hopefully I can get to the bottom of this. Okay. Looks like I got to the bottom. Oh, wow. I skipped some here somehow. It jumped all the way to the bottom. Holy moly. You guys are talking too much in the chat here. Okay. I really need to keep track of the chat more often as I stream, but I get too caught up in the actual stream and talking to look at what other people are saying. Okay, that's a question to other people in the chat. Don't care. Alright. Zach is a cuckservative, according to Google It. But then again, Google It never says anything that is actually accurate. So...
Yeah, Google It says things that are occasionally funny, though.
Alright, I'm out of the noisy-ass factory and have my microphone on again.
Hooray.
Okay. Yes, but Zach does like trains. Trains?
I think he's...
That's supposed to be trannies. That's probably an autocorrect. Because I read it first as trannies, and I was going to actually say it out loud as trannies, and I'm like, wait a minute, that says trains. He likes trains what? Trains whistles? Trains wheels?
Maybe he likes to run trains on trannies.
Oh, yeah. Yes, Zach definitely is the type of person to run trains on trannies. Actually, I think he wants Blair White and her boyfriend, or his boyfriend, whatever. His, her, whatever. Yeah, he wants both of them to run a train on him. That's my understanding of the situation.
Zach who? Zach Galifianakis?
No, Zach is the dark conservatarian in the live chats here. So
I don't have the live chat open because I'm driving.
Yeah, so I don't think it's actually immoral to be sharing screen caps of Twitter. I would just say if you're in a two-person conversation where it's just you and one other person, best to ask them before using it in something.
Right, except in certain extreme circumstances.
Like if they're talking about like illegal activity or something that is outright immoral or unethical, which then
like
I watched
lying.
a guy get fired over a Twitter DM today.
Oh
wow,
shit!
really?
He sent a Twitter DM to somebody that I follow, basically saying that he hopes that she gets raped and murdered.
Oh shit!
So something along those lines. Yeah, that's probably something you should share.
That's probably that's probably something you should never post on Twitter. God damn.
Yeah.
No, he sent it as a DM, and she posted the DM.
Still, even as a DM, you shouldn't post shit like that. Yeah.
So then he was all like, Twitter support, they're violating the terms of service by making public private DMs without my permission. His account's gone. Like, not this user has been suspended. The account is gone. His employer was in the tweet thread going, yeah, we're looking into this.
Oh,
yeah,
shit.
well, the
shitty thing is the chick that received the rape and death threats, her account got suspended too because she did violate the terms of service.
By posting it on her Twitter? She could have just reported that inside the actual DM itself.
Oh, I know.
Because that even in DMs, that is a violation of Twitter rules.
But
and
since she posted it from her DMs to the public sphere, he reported her for like targeted harassment or whatever.
Oh man, Twitter is put themselves in a like seriously.
The guy don't have a job no more. His Twitter account was like straight up deleted, but she's in Twitter jail.
Yeah, well, I don't know why Twitter bothered to put her in Twitter jail. It's like, oh, somebody reported something. We have to obviously have to accept that as if it's valid.
And
why would he send such a
Twitter? If you go on Twitter and type in hashtag free Zyklon, it'll pop up somewhere.
Why would he post some shit like that? Was he just like really pissed off at her for something?
I think I actually have the DM saved. I think I downloaded it. Let's see here. Yeah. Hi there. I just bumped into your little Nazi timeline, and I must say you and your kind really deserve to be repeatedly raped and beaten to death.
Whoa, dude.
I'm just a nobody on the internet, but life's fair, and someone will do the job soon.
Damn.
And the grossest thing is that deep down, you know that you'll actually enjoy it a bit while your life slowly goes away. Cheers.
Holy shit, what a lunatic.
Yeah, that's...
God.
Now, I understand he probably thought it was meant as a joke or something to not be taken seriously.
I don't see any joke there. I don't see a joke in that tweet. I don't see anything.
I know, her username was like Zyklon something or another, and her at was 6 mil dead... What was it? 6 mil dead. I don't remember the last word of it.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to get back to the rest of the stream because we still have 13 minutes to go, and I only want this stream to go on for maybe another half hour, if that. Because I mean, we're already at pushing at the hour and a half mark.
I'm getting tired, so I'm probably not going to stay more than a half an hour at the most.
Okay.
And those are Celtic people, Latin people, German people, Anglo-Saxon people, Slavs, and so on. We know a white person when we see one.
What's the point of getting DNA tests if you know white people when you see them?
So he talks about the core stock of white people.
What if someone's like
Jews are a distinct people, obviously. They
obviously? How is that obvious?
Yeah, what if they infiltrated?
What if they just say that we're white? Which they do on a
I don't understand. You're saying, what's the point of a DNA test? I never.
Because he didn't mention Hispanics, which there are Hispanics
I'm just saying
who
that
look like the same as whites that he's talking about.
White race, I don't think it's a particularly contentious one.
You can't
if you
it
don't
is contentious.
benefit from
yes, it is very
action,
contentious.
you're white.
Holy
Let's
shit!
Put it that way. Is that
so? The Japanese are white, and certain
guys, come on.
That is the honest categorization of what
I like his response that, oh, come on, guys, you guys are being a... No, he was just, he was taking your definition and applying it to, and like, oh yeah, well that would include this group and that group. And he's like, oh, well, come on, you wouldn't seriously. And I'm like, well, according to the definition you just gave, yes, it would. It would include the Japanese. Dude, it's... And there are so many people that you can't tell that they're a different race. Like, I mean, yeah, because there are Hispanic people, yes, sometimes you can tell, okay, that guy's definitely a beaner, right? That guy definitely looks Mexican. And I'm only saying beaner, not to be racist, but just because that's what popped in my head. I'm thinking Cheech and Chong. Whatever.
Well, your channel's getting deleted.
Oh yeah, my channel's getting deleted because I said this word, and I'm like,
yes,
no.
yeah. Tomorrow, whereas Logan Paul's will get it.
Yeah, okay. Cheech and Chong is actually a really good example of this because they're both Hispanic, and yet Chong looks like a white guy, and Cheech looks like a Mexican. Like he's extremely dark. He's got the typical facial features, whereas Chong could pass just for a white dude. But they're both Hispanic. Like, because you've seen Chong without his beard and all that sort of thing. It's like he's indistinguishable from the people that Richard Spencer is talking about. And yet they're both from the same part of Mexico. Maybe they weren't born in Mexico. Maybe they were born in Texas. I don't remember the exact... But, I mean, they're both from the same area, from the same neighborhoods. And yet they look like they're two separate races, but they're probably genetically closer than Sargon is to Spencer. So it's just goofy that he think, oh yeah, it should be so obvious to tell the two apart, and like, no.
Yeah, that is absolutely a name.
All right, let's keep going.
White person is I have ever heard. It's entirely contextual.
And what about...
You're not going to have affirmative action, are you? Because you're not going to have any non-white people. That's such a silly thing to say.
I won't even comment upon that. I'm just simply...
You've got nothing...
Oh, dude, that's awesome. So you're saying that affirmative action is... anybody who doesn't qualify for affirmative action is thus white. And that's why Styx brought up Japanese people. And he's like, well, once you get your established society, you won't have affirmative action for anybody. Because everybody in there will be white. And then you've lost your definition. So anybody can come in and join the country and be part of your white ethno-state. Because your definition is gone. And he's like, oh, he doesn't admit that his point was stupid or that his statement was stupid and maybe he needs to redefine his terms. No, he just completely says, oh, you guys are just being babies about this and you guys are just being like, no, they're doing exactly what you're supposed to do.
I don't know how anyone could take Spencer seriously. I mean, his arguments are so childish and pedantic.
Tommy Chong is American and Cheech Marine is California native.
Okay. Didn't they? I thought they grew up in the same neighborhood because they talk about that in their comedy skits, right?
Richard Anthony Marine was born in Los Angeles, California, and he is Cheech.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tommy Chong was Thomas B. Ken Chong, born in Canada. Edmonton, Alberta, Canada.
Oh, he was born in Canada. What?
Yep.
Oh.
And he is Thomas B. Kin Chong. He is Korean, I think.
Wait,
maybe?
Korean? Wow, I was way off.
I've never heard of a Mexican that was a Kin Chong.
I thought that was a stage name. Okay, wow, I am way wrong on that then.
Yeah, when you're saying that, I'm like,
so many of their comedy skits are around them being Mexican.
It's because it's funny. They are the ultimate. What do they call that? Where you acquire somebody else's. What the hell is the word that all those black people use today? They're stealing our ethnicity.
Oh, cultural appropriation?
Yeah, they're the original cultural appropriators. A Canadian and a Californian. A Canadian freaking.
Okay.
Asian.
Okay, then yeah, just ignore the statements I made earlier. I was way wrong on that. So apparently Chong is Asian, and Cheech probably Mexican.
Cheech's No, Cheech is okay. Hang on, Cheech.
Not from Mexico.
His actual name is Richard Anthony Marion or Marion.
Yeah. But I mean, does it say anything about his actual race? I mean, because it could. I don't know. Yeah. You just destroyed my childhood. Way to go. Here I was thinking that they were both Hispanic, and nope, not even close.
No, Holmes, you're not Hispanic.
Well, yeah, the more you know, right? Okay, so, I have to come up with another example of two people who are of the same race who look different. Anybody got any examples? Because that was, I was like, oh, hey, I could just use that. Nope, can't even do that.
Goddamn trap fucking everything up.
Okay, I'm trying to think of a good example of... Well, okay. So I'm just going to go with the generic. There are Hispanic people who look white, and you cannot tell if they are of Latin descent, or... Is Latin a race? No. Latin's like a language, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because there's a definite distinct look about someone who is from Mexico or from South America who is dark-skinned, right? It's more of like a... Because it's not the same skin tone as someone from Africa, even from Northern Africa. It's more of like a Native American mixed with European, right? Is that generally where that...
Generally, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's more like the mulatto, right? Or is...
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if that's technically a race, but there's a definite visual distinction. See, this is why Richard Spencer's definitions don't quite make sense. It's like, yes, there are distinct...
And that's ultimately the problem with race realism in general. Yes, there are regional differences, but they are so hard to define. There's so much
overlap, and there's so much...
much overlap, yeah.
There's only 4.
How do you define them?
You have Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, and then the interbreeding, if you want to call it that, is mulattoes.
Huh.
Even if it's an Asian that has or if it's a Mongoloid, which is Asian.
Yeah.
That has a Caucasoid's baby, which is white.
Okay.
It's still a mulatto.
Okay, so you're saying that people from India are not a separate race, and Native Americans are not a separate race. Both of those would fall under Mongoloid?
Actually, yes, Native Americans, the DNA studies that they've done, even on ancient bodies, they are Mongoloid. Yeah, Mongoloid.
I've heard the opposite, that they were actually had a Caucasian origin.
Not that I've seen. I just looked this up yesterday.
Yeah, but visually, the facial features and builds and stuff are not the same. So I guess maybe that's weird.
Different culture.
Because even Japanese and Chinese people, you can tell the difference. Because usually Chinese people are lighter skinned, they're a little more pale in comparison, whereas Japanese people are a little darker in tone. But I mean, they both kind of have like a...
Plus, the eye is one squinty from the nukes, and the other one's round from shock of the nukes.
Wow.
But stuff like that.
Okay, now the stream's definitely gonna get taken down. Yeah.
Stuff like that is just basically genetic mutations that happened who knows how many years ago. And the people that had the mutations, it passed on, and they didn't die out, and blah, 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 blah.
Okay, but you're saying, Mongoloid. Yeah, racially they would fall under the Mongoloid. Okay. That makes a little bit more sense.
Most Chinese are Mongoloid.
Google it. I am not gonna repeat the perverted shit you posted in the chat again. You tricked me into doing that once, and I'm not gonna make the same mistake again.
I can't see chat. What did he say?
Nothing. Google it said nothing. Google it did not say a single thing. There is no Google it. Okay.
Hey, we don't have text to voice around here. What's wrong with you?
Nope.
Oh, dude,
Google it doesn't exist. There is no Google it in the world. Okay.
All right, let's see if I can scroll back through this.
No,
Give me the source material. I don't know what you're talking about. You wouldn't even know I was part Hispanic. Okay, well, I'm going to use Baphomet, even though I don't know what Baphomet looks like. But yes, that's a prime example that Spencer's viewpoint is wrong, and it's so there are distinct differences between groups of people that you can figure out, but then there's overlap. There's so much overlap that it becomes difficult to separate completely the two groups, or any group for that matter. And that's what Richard Spencer is trying to say. Oh, like, hey, there's these definite distinctions between groups of people, and you can draw these firm lines, but I just can't point out where these firm lines are. And how dare you by saying that I can't point out where these firm lines are, that's just laughable and childish. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
That's why your entire worldview is laughable and childish. Yes.
Well, just do what Israel does when you apply for citizenship. Do a DNA test.
Okay, so they do DNA tests, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright,
And I'm driving on 2 inches of ice in a semi right now.
Fuck.
Okay, so Zach says that I better apologize to S-Man Speaks, you chink.
You chink.
Yeah. I guess it's because I said Beaner, and so, I guess
Chink in your arm, Spencer.
Yeah, so S-Man is apparently Hispanic, and
S-Man is Hispanic.
Yeah, does he look Hispanic? I don't know. It doesn't look it to me.
Does that stand for Spick Man?
Yeah, I think that's what the S stand. Yeah. See, Spick seems like more of an actual insult, and then Beaner, right? Or maybe that's just me.
Isn't Spick for Italians? I don't know. I'm confused.
No. It's Hispanic, so it's Spick.
Oh yeah, Italians are wops. That's right.
Yeah. Or Guidos. So.
Or if they're Sicilian, I'm Sicilian. Oh, so you're black. What? No, I'm Italian. You said you're Sicilian. Yeah, I'm Sicilian. No, you're black.
Huh?
What? Well, Sicily was island of Africa for how many thousands of years?
Did not know that. He says you're
the native Sicilians, if you run a DNA test on them, if you can find one, they're black.
Okay.
Come on, it's only 2 inches of ice. Why is everybody doing 30? We could do at least 55. Come on.
Dude.
Oh, you think I'm joking.
Spickman Speaks. Holy shit.
Hey, whoa, what is this? Google it. Hey. Hey.
Google it's posting perverted shit again.
Yeah, you don't get to say nothing about Barbara. You can say whatever you want about other people on the stream, but you keep her out of this.
Google it likes to post perverted shit, okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Barbara Streisand?
It's all right if you wanted to get a Bill Clinton from some YouTube celebrity. That's fine. I got no problem with that.
You wanted to get a Bill Clinton from a YouTube celebrity, so is Bill Clinton a sexual move now?
Apparently,
actually the move is referred to as a Lewinsky.
Yeah.
Oh, the Lewinsky.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. A Lewinsky is a sexual move.
Although calling it a BC is closer to a BJ, right?
Yes, a BJ,
I always thought that was called the secretary.
From a YouTube,
all this time.
Yes, from a
I'm too slow at reading. I should really stop paying so much attention to the chat there, trying to look for stuff. But all right, let's get back to the conversation and try to get out a couple more minutes here.
Richard.
See, this is
Sargon. This is really tedious.
This is my problem with a lot of people online.
This is the part where it gets to mostly personal attacks against each other because
is not really a matter of great debate. One can ask these prickly questions.
You mean questions that are going to come up necessarily in the establishment of a white ethno-state? Go on.
Sure, they came up in the establishment of an Israeli state.
Israel. Okay, BTK. So where does the Jewish population fit into that? Because they're not Caucasoid, Mongoloid, or Negroid, right? Or they would be their own separate thing.
No, that'd be
according to Spencer.
Caucasoid.
They're Caucasoid mulattoes.
Okay.
Or
So
mulatto-sized Caucasoids.
okay.
They're primarily well, actually, if you want to go with the true ethnic Ashkenazi Jews, they're pretty much split evenly between Caucasoid and Mongoloid because they're from the Middle East.
Okay. And so people from the Middle East, those would also be Mongoloid, right?
Yes. Or they'd be mulatto, like mulatto-sized Mongoloid.
Weird. Yeah, I thought there was like 6 races, but maybe maybe I'm
I don't know, only 3 I know of. I mean, there might have came out with 3 more or gotten rid of 3. I don't know. I looked it up yesterday, and I only saw Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, and then there's a mulattoization, or however the hell it's pronounced, of all 3.
Okay, so it'd be kind of like the primary colors, right? So your blue, yellow, and red, and then the mix between them would be considered the Mongol or mulattoes. Mulatto.
Yeah, you got black, white, and yellow.
Yeah. And then so black and yellow would be one type, and then black and white would be one type, and then white and yellow would be a third type. So there's 3 primary races and then 3 secondary races.
Yeah, something like that.
That sounds terrible. All right. And so
I think we should just call them all the grays and
yeah, so then the Jewish people would be in between Mongoloid and Caucasoid, and then people from the Middle East would be kind of like in between Mongoloid and Negroid, and then the Native American or South American populations would be closer to like Caucasoid and Negroid, right?
Native Americans, the bodies that they've dug up,
because
like,
you're saying that
several thousand years
like Mongoloid.
Yeah, they're Mongoloid with a hint of Caucasoid. So
they'd be
you have
closer
your
to
initial
Jewish.
mix.
So
you have your initial
be
mix,
closer
and
to,
then you have like thousands of years of quote unquote inbreeding.
So they'd be closer to the Jewish population than to.
Yes.
That's weird. All right. Let's get back to trying to figure out the rest of this stream.
Will exist. It's a flourishing society. It has a national order. These are practical questions that can be answered.
You missed the comments.
Sargon, I really find you to be a very tedious and annoying
I
person.
started with good intentions, Rich. Then you started like acting like an ass.
Sargon, I am
not
going to say something that might be the most insulting thing we've ever heard.
Yeah. So this is the area where a lot of people are saying that Sargon lost this debate or was, showing a poor performance and all this sort of thing. But I showed at the beginning of this, it started off where Spencer was talking normally, Sargon was bringing up arguments. And Spencer responded by calling Sargon autistic, and things just kind of slowly devolved.
That is kind of funny. You got to admit that's funny because Sargon frequently overuses using autistic as a slur. So for Spencer to call Sargon that is pretty damn funny. Okay, It's the first thing I'm ever going to praise Richard Spencer for is right there.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny, but it sets the tone of the entire. So Sargon started off thinking, okay, this is going to be a high kind of higher level debate, highbrow, and then Spencer goes low, and then Sargon's like, okay, this is how it's going to be. I'm going to keep going low, and then Spencer tried to go back high, and you're like, well, once you've already gone low, you've lost your high ground. You can't keep going back up there as if you never went low. You're like, okay, well, you see, look, you're making this personal. You're making these petty arguments, and you're making this. Not about the issue, but personal attacks. And he's like, well, you started it. You made it that way. And once the debate turns into that, you can't go back up to these lofty ideals and expect it to stay there. That's just... It's like if you're in a boxing match and you punch somebody in the nuts, do you think that you're actually going to go back to the rigorous rules of boxing? No, it becomes just like, hey, okay,
Well, you're in a
it
boxing
becomes an
match, you
all-out
punch
street
somebody in
fight.
the nuts, the referee separates you, the bell rings, you go back at it. You're not allowed to punch him back in the nuts.
Okay, that's at like a professional boxing match, right? This is not a refereed debate sort of thing. This is not this is not on HBO or pay-per-view. So once it goes low, there is no going back up, at least in this type of debate. If it was like an Oxford debate or whatever, then maybe I could understand. Okay, that was a low blow, but you know that's supposed to be kind of a one-off. But it seemed like they kept doing low blows to each other, and then Richard Spencer's like, hey, why are you doing those? And like, you're the one who set the tone here. All right. Anyway, that's just my.
Told
take.
you
You
whenever you're ready
think
to give it. Just go
you
ahead.
think that you are more intelligent than you are, and that's actually a really tricky place to
How
be.
intelligent am I?
I don't think you're very intelligent.
Oh, okay. Spencer
that's
doesn't
a-
think you're very
that's a
intelligent.
personal
Oh no.
attack.
Because your opinion's very important. to
I,
me.
Sargon, I have
Oh, no,
debated
what am I gonna
people
do?
who-
Spencer
who
doesn't
have
think I'm intelligent.
addressed what I'm actually
Stop.
saying in the core. You're
And I have
nibbling
to.
around the
You
edges in a
literally
way that's just
can't
tedious and
seem to
annoying.
understand what I'm actually saying when I talk to you about your first
Oh,
principle.
I can't understand. Oh,
Yes,
really,
you
Sargon?
can't. You
I
literally
can't
just sat there and
understand
said, I don't-
Sargon.
This is
Yes.
all autistic. I don't understand what you're saying. This is what you just said to me.
What is your critique of there's clearly a core white stock?
Ugh, he's been criticizing, he's been providing counter arguments to it this entire time, and you just refuse to acknowledge any of those and saying that you can't understand them. That's what Sargon was just saying, Spencer.
Your
And
your
you're
inability
saying-
to understand something does not mean it's not a valid point.
Yeah. So, and meanwhile, Richard Spencer is saying that Sargon isn't intelligent. And you're like, coming from an idiot like Spencer, how is calling Sargon, oh, I don't think you're very intelligent? Like, coming from you, that means like, oh, okay. And my dog doesn't think that I...
I was hoping that
or some kind
I was
of...
hoping that
Hmm.
hold on. I was hoping that Spencer was gonna say to Sargon, "Do you go to college, bro?"
Yeah. Did you even go to college? I don't think you're very intelligent. You didn't go to college.
Yeah, you're dumb, bro. Yeah,
Yeah, it's silly, but it's like saying, if your 2-year-old thinks that you're stupid, that you're like, oh yeah, oh my 2-year-old thinks I'm dumb. Oh no, I gotta fix this. Like, no, it's like, yeah, you don't take the criticism of someone who's not all that together. Anyway.
That is not
I
debatable.
just gave
What is
it,
your
Richard.
critique of that?
How do you identify them?
I'm saying, that, how
You
do
said
I
affirmative
identify them?
action,
You
which is
could
a
do it in a
pretty
myriad of different ways. One of which is a 23andMe test. One of which is a simple
Right, so
eyeball
DNA testing
test.
is going to be required for the ethnostate.
Yeah.
There are going to be people, though, that you might not
What is your
qualify as
point?
white under your opinion, though, that are going to
I
look
agree with
white.
you. I agree with what Styx is saying. There is
And-
always going to be some tricky, blurry areas to anything. But just because there's a fuzzy border doesn't mean that a concept doesn't exist. I
Yeah,
mean,
but what
there's
we're
a
saying is
fuzzy
you're gonna end
border
up getting
between
a lot of mission
colors.
creep. You're going to see a lot of people
Yeah.
using this for their own advantage and saying, I'm
I'm sure
whiter
we
than you,"
would.
and
I'm sure we would. That's a purely pragmatic.
Yeah, so it
issue
doesn't
you're
fix
raising.
anything,
It doesn't-
Richard. That's
No,
the
it's
not
entire
actually,
point.
Sargon.
It is,
It's
Richard.
because
Listen
you
to what
don't
I'm saying.
understand
Brother,
argumentation. You
I
think
don't understand
this is some
what
great
you're saying.
reputation, but
Serious.
it's not. It's
I'm
a
trying to
tedious.
explain to
Can
you
I
what
ask
you're
a
saying.
question?
You don't even understand it.
Well,
You
I
don't
think
understand your own
Sargon,
philosophy.
you
Hang on,
just
hang on,
really need
Richard,
to be
Yeah.
quiet.
Can
I
I-
would rather
I think
talk with
Richard-
Styx because Styx
Come
is
on.
actually
Wait, hang on,
addressing.
hang on.
Stop
hang on.
acting like
Can
a
I
goddamn
jump
leftist.
in?
What are you going to do, censor me?
Can I jump in with a quick point here?
Sure,
I can
Yeah.
only roll my eyes.
Trying
in
to
this,
get through the
Richard,
rest of
Richard,
this because I mean,
let's-
this just kind of goes to them back and forth,
I
just
would
kind
say
of talking about the
this,
same
the
sorts of points.
complication over this in the sense of the Americas is perhaps more important. And this is what I've tried to make this point to people, and they think it makes me like a Nazi gatekeeper. I've said before, if you're talking about maybe Europe raising up through tribalism, yeah, you've got basically de facto ethno-states throughout time. You've also got empires that are like multicultural, so-called, or diverse, or whatever. But on this side of the pond, things are already mixed. The fundamental problem, as you keep pointing out, is pragmatism. It's the same problem that plagues people who want to deport however many millions of people. It's the same problem that plagues communism. Communism on paper, okay, it's great. It's hallelujah. Everyone's equal. We've all got enough food. You can do whatever you want, as long as you're not abusing others. It's almost like a libertarian utopia when you think of communism taken to its ultimate utopian goal, but it's never worked. It's not pragmatic. It can't be implemented without so much abuse it cripples it.
All right, I'm looking at the chat while they're having this discussion. That's not really how you spell Ashkenazi, is it? Or Ashkenazi? Because if it's got the word Nazi in it, that's just kind of like, really?
No, it's SHI. It's not Nazi.
They're spelling it with the Nazi in it. I was like, wait a minute, I'm reading it like it's that, but that's not how it actually spelled, right? Yeah, okay.
Guys, I'm
Yeah.
I'm crashing. I gotta head out.
That's fine. Yeah, thanks for hanging out as long as you did.
No problem.
We got 8 more minutes of this crap. Yep. Okay. Yeah, because I know I've written it down before, and I was like, well, that looks familiar, but I can't think of how it's actually spelled. It's like, wait a minute, there's no way. How did I not notice that before? Okay, do you think it's ethical to punch Nazis? To
No.
punch Nazis, yes, but there are no living Nazis, so,
I'd say no.
the people who are being labeled as Nazis currently, no. Because anybody can be labeled as a Nazi. The Nazis were actually, they're actually wearing uniforms, and we didn't just punch them, we fought an entire war, and we killed lots of them.
Well, no, even your general German citizen that voted for an Austrian dude under the Nazi Party, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, would be a Nazi, just like somebody that votes for Hillary would be a Democrat, or an independent.
Yeah, okay. So in that regard,
So I'd say
then no. In that regard, no. But in general, if they're wearing the Nazi uniform, they're going out and actually participating in the wars and running the concentration camps and whatnot, then yes. Because, I mean, Inglourious Basterds was freaking awesome. I want my scalps. You're going to get me my scalps.
I know there's like freaking 2 inches of ice on the road, people, but god damn it, stay in your lane. I can't see my lane because I can't see any stripes.
That is...
It's 4 wide here. Figure it out. I'm bigger. I'm coming through.
Alright.
I have a higher vantage point,
My
so I can try to see
problem
the
with
lines.
identitarianism as it overlaps in a country where it's already not an ethno-state, there's already a strong civic sense or structure, whether it's flawed or works better or worse, doesn't really matter. By trying to displace it with the ethno-state, it will become abusive. And so that sets certain countries apart from others. Now, you may say, oh, well, haha, we've discovered the Marxist plot, because now it's obvious the EU people, they want to pump maybe European countries that were homogenous before, full of migrants, in order to cause the same issue for future identitarians. But, like, I don't really care if some other country, because I have a national identity, chooses to be an ethno-state. There are white nations that are almost homogenous. I mean, think of Poland. There are black nations that are almost homogenous. But, like, what would you even say, for instance? So let me ask
the
this.
United States is an ethno-state. I mean,
No.
originally.
Yeah, so I think Styx was just pointing out something we were talking about earlier. Is like, yeah, they already have these ethno-states, and they're not these utopian places that you assume the United States will become once we reach an ethno-state. So, what exactly are you solving?
Iceland, for example, Iceland has like some of the world's lowest crime rates, and they are pretty much entirely white.
Yeah, but they're not Richard Spencer's utopian view, right? They're not his... Otherwise, he would just say, oh, well, why don't I just move there? And because they already have what I want, right?
Because he doesn't want to move. He's a nationalist. You're forgetting the nationalist part. He doesn't want to leave his current nation. He wants to mold the nation into what he views how it should be. I worded that all slaughtery, but I think I got my message across.
Yeah, so it's he doesn't want to go somewhere where it's already in effect. He wants to try to change an entire culture. But that's, again, that to me, that screams leftist, because that is usually what they do. They never
We
try
talked about that at length.
yeah.
Off air. He's
Yeah.
definitely a leftist.
Yeah, it's because he doesn't. He's like, oh, I want to stay where I am and get everyone to conform to my worldview instead of just going to where it's already the norm or something similar that would be easy to adjust to my worldview.
And the main reason why he can't claim with any intellectual honesty that he's on the right on the political spectrum, the right side of it, is his ethno-state will not exist without big government power enforcing it, enforcing its creation anyway. And I mean, why would you go into like a communist socialist government to create your ethno-state and then expect to be able to devolve it back down into into like anarcho-capitalism or something?
Yeah, well, let's give this government ultimate power, and we're gonna have to, like they said earlier, you're gonna have to, disband the Constitution temporarily, even if it's temporarily. What happens if you give a government all that kinds of power and you think it's gonna step down? And you're just like, no, there's been very rare occasions where someone was granted all of that and they chose to step down. George Washington is an example, and who's the other one? Is it Syracuse? I think his name is Syracuse. Yeah, so he's a was that Roman or Greek? I can't remember. But Syracuse was I think he was emperor, so I think it was Roman, right? But so he was this really amazing general and great leader, and he was on his farm, and there was an invading army, and so they like, hey, Syracuse, we need you to take over and run things. He came back, came in charge, defeated their enemies, made the country peaceful again, and then denounced his authority and went back to being a farmer. And like, those kinds of people are incredibly rare, and you will rarely find a government that does, like, if you're talking about like an organization of people, finding a single individual willing to, abandon all that power is as rarity in itself. But finding a group of people that would like-mindedly agree to get rid of it.
Yeah, even like FDR, like 4 terms?
I think he did 3 terms, and he was up for a 4th term and stood down on the 4th one.
And he realized that the nation was going to stagnate if you just kept the same person in charge too long. So that's why we got we can't do more than 2 terms.
Yeah. It's very, if you look at governments in general, it's very rare that they ever give up power, and mostly it's acquiring more and more power to themselves, which is why we're currently in our situation. All right, back to the stream.
Absolutely.
Okay,
the
Rich,
1790 Immigration Act effectively said that the immigrants to the United States should be white men and women of good character. No one had any dispute with this. Like, oh, what do we do with a white Turk with an Austrian grandmother? Look, those are questions that can be answered. But
and they considered the Irish to be non-white.
No,
they didn't
that's
consider.
actually a total myth. That's not
No. They
when
the Irish
were Irish
subhuman.
excluded in 1790?
No, have you
Irish
seen some of the stuff from the 1800s?
Anglos.
What
Irish
about Latin Americans? What about a white Mexican?
They interestingly did not address many of these issues because that wasn't a pragmatic concern. The 1924 Immigration Act did not even address Mexico, even though now Mexican immigration is the most important thing we think about. It was not in a what is effectively a racially defined ethno-state immigration act, 1924 as well as 1790. So America is a kind of ethno-state.
But that's the past, though.
Well, sometimes the past is the future, and sometimes the past has to be renewed. And sometimes we can look to the past for answers. In terms of the creation...
I just saw it in the chat. Apparently I was wrong. So he apparently died in his 4th term? I thought he'd never served a 4th term.
I thought he did 4.
Is that... No. It wasn't FDR, was it? It was...
Yeah.
I thought it was Teddy Roosevelt. I thought it was Teddy Roosevelt who served.
No, it was FDR, because he was through the entirety of the Great Depression and fucking World War I after fucking or not World War I. That was what war was going on? Was it World War II? Did he make it to World War II? I don't know. I'm driving. I can't look it up.
No, I can't look it up either. But okay, so Great Depression was in the 20s. It would have been World War One, right?
Well,
It was
Woodrow
the Great
Wilson-
Depression, then oh, crap. Was
the
it
Great
World War
Depression was
One, then the Great
after
Depression, or was it
Woodrow.
World?
The Great Depression was in the 30s, 1934.
Wait, no. What?
Yeah, the Great
Oh,
Depression
that's
was in the 30s because Woodrow Wilson was president in the 20s, and it was his
Ah.
act or his Federal Reserve thing that he signed that led to the economy.
That's
not
why I
being
should
able to bounce
memorize
back.
dates, but I never do. Okay, the Great Depression was in 1930s.
Yes.
29 to 39. World War One was okay. That was
And then,
ended
what,
in
1918?
1918. So this would have been World War Two. So it was the Great Depression, then World War Two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense than what we were saying. I really need.
Oh, what
Maybe
you were saying.
maybe there
I
is
was
a
right.
reason to memorize dates, so I don't have to look them up during a live stream. Okay, it was
It adds a
World
adds
War
a level
One,
of authenticity.
Great Depression, then World War Two, and man, really FDR? I thought it was Teddy Roosevelt was the one who.
Nah, Teddy was the big game hunter.
Yeah, I know, but everybody liked him and wanted to keep him around. I can't imagine everybody liking FDR and wanting to keep him for 4 freaking terms.
All of his socialist programs, all of his welfare programs that he put in place, got him votes. And all the programs that he put in place to save us from the Great Depression that are fucking us now.
Holy moly, yeah. So presidential term 33 to 45. That's 12 years. Damn. And yeah, he died in office. I thought he had stepped down. But so the term limits weren't put into place with him then.
No, he was the one that proposed it. I thought, where he was like, "Hey, nobody, this can't happen again." Oh, hey now, no, none of this sliding shit, you stupid fucking truck. There we go. That just means all my, I got like 1.5-inch fucking tread on my semi-tires because they're brand new. It means that they're packed full of fucking ice now.
Okay, so yeah.
I can't go fast enough because these idiots are going slow. I can't go fast enough to get the tires to kick the ice back out. So I'm just a big old fucking sled on ice now. The joys of driving a semi.
So, looking over this right now, but I don't think he actually.
It wasn't like his bill or anything, but I know he
No,
had a hand.
it was because of his presidency that actually got into law, where there was term limits.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but he didn't last long in his 4th term. 82 days, so he didn't even make it a full year.
I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did, and he was there for the entire, pretty much the entirety of World War II. I mean, that had to have been rough.
Okay, and so it was after his death that people were like, okay, we definitely need term limits in place. Okay. Because, Teddy Roosevelt was after that, right?
No, Teddy was before Theodore. Teddy was he was before Theodore.
Yeah, he's for FDR. Because Theodore is the same person. Yeah, because he was from 1901 to 1909.
Which part of which amendment of the Constitution or rule of the Constitution enables you to pass an amendment with was it 3/4 of the states? You know, the one where it doesn't go through Congress, it goes to the states.
I'm not
There's
sure what
two
you're
ways
talking
to
about.
pass an amendment to the Constitution. One is Congress submits votes, etc. on it, and the other one is the states form a whatever it's called, and they pass one through the other method. I'm driving. I can't look it up. I'm having a brain fart. There are 14 or 16 states right now that through the council or whatever that they use to pass an amendment that have voted in favor of limiting the terms for congressmen. Because obviously Congress isn't going to pass it.
Yeah.
But the the state's government can get together, and if enough of them sign on to it, an amendment to the Constitution can be passed that way. And there's like 14 or 16 of them that have come together and signed it to make it so that Congress people can only serve, I think it's 2 terms.
According to this, it looks like the Supreme Court's actually the one that made that the case.
Oh, the presidential?
No, not the presidential ones. The congressional term limits.
Yeah. Well, there are no congressional term limits.
Right? No. Okay. Hang on a second. Maybe I'm... Okay. That states cannot impose term limits upon their Federal Reserve... Oh, okay, that cannot. Sorry.
Right.
So the Supreme Court shot down the states imposing term limits on their representatives and senators.
Right. And Congress won't pass one, obviously, because they'd be shooting themselves in the foot and taking their own job away from themselves.
Yeah.
So there's there's 2 ways to pass an amendment to the Constitution in this country.
Well, there should have been, but the Supreme Court shot down one of them, so the other one...
No. There's... No, they didn't. What the Supreme Court shot down was saying that the individual states do not have the right to impose term limits.
But
that
the states could all...
shooting down an amendment to the Constitution.
Oh, okay. So that wasn't actually a proposed amendment. Gotcha.
No, they're still trying to get enough states behind it. Like I said, I'm having a brain fart. I don't remember what it's called, the process.
All of this is unfamiliar territory to me, so you probably know more about it than I do. So if you can't remember it, then... My knowledge of history is apparently pretty more sporadic than I realized. It's a good thing we got this on the live stream. All right.
The Constitution lays out 2 ways that amendment to the Constitution can be enacted. One is through a proposal from Congress, and the other is through a Council of the States.
Okay.
The Council of the States doesn't go through Congress. It's enough states say yay, and then there's either a public vote or the states, once there's enough states, the states vote, and it's a set percentage, and if enough of the, they meet that percentage, then there's a new amendment to the Constitution.
So Article 5 of the Constitution prescribes how an amendment can become part of the Constitution. While there are 2 ways, only one has ever been used. All 27 amendments have been ratified after 2/3 of the House and Senate approved the proposal and sent it to the states for a vote. Then 3/4 of the states must affirm the proposed amendment. The other method of passing an amendment requires a constitutional convention to be called by 2/3 of the legislatures of the states. That convention can propose as many amendments as it deems necessary. Those amendments must be approved by 3/4 of the states.
Yeah, there is an open. It's not official. If you Google search.
It's never been done before, so...
There's one, it's not going to be officially labeled a constitutional convention until, 3/4 of the states?
Yeah.
Sign on to it.
Yeah.
But there's like 14 states so far that have independently gone through the process. So once enough states do it, once that 75% is hit, it'll be called a constitutional convention at that point.
Yeah. So we got talking about too many separate things and is now past 8:13. I don't want this to go on too long, so I think I'm just gonna play the other 6 minutes and not interrupt the rest of it. Well, maybe, I don't know, because I gotta keep interrupting it. But let's just.
Of a concept of whiteness.
I do want to get through this because I don't want to spend.
Has a very important
I only want to spend one more week at the
Europeans
most discussing this and
have
dissecting
often defined
it.
themselves purely ethnically, and they've been at war with one another. This is
So,
another kind of
because this was the bulk of it, as what I condensed into this video.
We can say white nationalism is like, oh, but the Germans hate the French, and the French hate the English, and the English hate the Irish.
Because it was a 4-hour freaking stream.
America actually has something to teach Europeans in the sense that so many of those ethnic disputes, which were real at a time, were ultimately dissolved, and there is a concept of
they weren't dissolved.
English,
you still have
America
disagreements between groups of people, whether it's based on ethnical grounds or religious grounds or national grounds.
The national tensions in America.
If I may,
a lot of
second,
the resolution was
if
actually
just
intermarriage and other things.
Hey, sorry, just
No,
1 second.
it was a national identity.
That's also a major as well.
Yeah, even with the national identity.
I'd like to move.
So that's I gotta interrupt here. Even with the national identity, right now we have, disagreements within the United States, even with the national identity, and he's assuming that if we were just all the same race and we had the same nationality, well then we'd get along. Well, there was the war between the North and the South. You had a national identity between the North and the South, and you had a mostly homogenous group, and yet we still had an all-out civil war.
But the question would be, I'm going to play devil advocate, and I'm Richard Spencer now.
Yeah.
Would we have had a civil war in the United States if we didn't have blacks?
I believe we would have, because it wasn't just slavery. There was it was the North taking advantage of the South, right? They were going to.
The North would have been able to take advantage of the South in the same manner as they did if it wasn't for the South relying on slave work.
Maybe not, because maybe they would have been. Maybe the South would have been more industrialized, and they would have caught up to the North. And
exactly.
Yeah. Huh.
Because as we've seen in the years since, the South has the resources to be industrial. They have
and there's actually a lot of industry in the South now. It's not as much as the Northern, but I mean, then again, a lot of the industry in the North has disappeared. Detroit used to be a big hub for that, and now has collapsed.
Detroit's
and Chicago's same, right? Used to be an industrial center, industrial hub, and not so much.
Chicago's actually a lot more of an industrial hub still than Detroit is.
Yeah,
Detroit's
Detroit.
A fucking shame.
Yeah.
It's fucking. What the Democrats did to Detroit is fucking horrendous. They all need to be shot for it.
Okay, so yeah, it might be the case that the North and South wouldn't have fought had it not been for the institution of slavery. But the institution of slavery could have existed even without black populations. It could have existed with, slaves, white slaves as well. So, I mean, because there's plenty of other cultures like the Greek civilization where slaves were not a particular race; they were just anybody who was of the lower classes or was of the lower standing in society.
Whites enslaving whites in America?
No, not in America.
Really be considered? It's theoretical. Yeah. Would that really be considered chattel slavery, or would that just be a strictly enforced welfare state? Where you can't provide for yourself, so we'll provide for you. You just have to do labor for us.
Well, let's take it more toward an actual historical setting. In ancient Greece, where there were slaves, or the Roman Empire for that matter, either of those would work, where there were slaves and they had the ability to industrialize. If half of the population had industrialized and the other half was still relying on slave labor, and the industrialized half was forcing the half that was still using slave labor, even if the slave labor was the same race as the majority of the population, there would have been that same Civil War setting. Right? Is that not...
I don't know, because if you want to actually go into the cultures of Greece, their police force was the slaves.
Yeah.
So they didn't have like a slave uprising. The slaves,
Yeah.
whilst the slaves in Greece were slaves in name only.
Yeah, because they had better
they could
living
earn
conditions than the slaves under slavery
If they
in
worked
the
hard
U.S.
enough for long enough, they could save up enough to buy their freedom.
Yeah, and which in the South they had instituted programs to buy their freedom.
So it's basically a lot more akin to a welfare state, like a forced welfare state, than chattel slavery.
Yeah. So, but there was still a majority of plantations that would not allow their slaves to purchase their freedom, and would beat them and whip them and feed them to dogs and hang them and that sort of thing.
Right. But
so,
if you're talking about America again now, if the slaves were white, would they have been treated the same? I don't think they would.
I don't know.
Then again, if you look at the way the Irish were treated when they were brought over here as slaves, even though everybody will say the Irish were never slaves. Yeah, I know better. I have a close friend whose family Bible from the 1600s. The Irishman, the first guy in this family, was brought over here as a slave. So they can say, "Oh, this never happened." All they want. It's written in paper, in a private diary, or family Bible rather.
Yeah, and the fact that both the Chinese and the Irish were treated like animals when they were working on the railroads.
Black slaves were expensive. If you could afford a black slave, you were well off. If you could afford an Irishman or a Chinese man, they were a dime a dozen.
Yeah, lots of deaths and just whatever. Doesn't matter. Those are easily replaceable. Doesn't matter if they die. Yeah.
Well, you could even fast forward to World War II?
The Japanese internment camps?
Military in Alaska. The black units that were sent up there were basically treated like fucking slaves.
Alright, well, let's get on with it. So, so the United States may not be a good example of so there are other countries, though, where same racial makeup, same national identity, and yet civil war ensued. The French would be a good example of this. The French Revolution. Predominantly the same racial makeup, and yet there was a civil war and a revolution. Same national identity, right?
That has nothing to do with race or race realism, and everything to do with an authoritarian power.
Yes, that's something that Spencer is ignoring. He's saying, as long as they have a similar racial makeup and a similar national identity, all of these problems go away. And you're like, no, they don't go away.
That's because he has to ignore it, or people will realize that he's a socialist.
Yeah, I was just trying to come up with an example that contradicts his viewpoint. I'm like, this is an example where you had what you're claiming will fix all the problems, and it didn't fix the problems. Okay.
Yeah, well, like I said, he could easily go, well, that had nothing to do with race.
And you're like, that's kind of exactly my point. It had nothing to do with race, so your solution of everything has to do with race doesn't fix it. Anyway, let's try to get through the last of this.
There's many variables and gray areas you have to factor in the government type too. I would agree. One piece of a puzzle at a time would basically be his argument.
Oh, okay, I get you. So he's saying, you got to solve that on top of it. But he's advocating for a system that would lead to a French. So even if he got his ethno-state, what he's advocating for with his universal healthcare system and his social programs and his welfare would lead to an inevitable collapse of that society, resulting in something similar to the French Revolution.
Yeah, what he needs to implement in order to get what he's trying to implement, so basically the government constructs that would be necessary to implement the ethno-state, is gonna lead to very bad places.
Alright, let's try to get through the rest of this.
Move on with the question, which actually refers to what we've been talking about. It seems that a lot of what I heard here is nitpicking on the details of the precision of the identity of race, precisely identifying what's white, what's Asian, what's black. In the end, Sargon, given that we can look at someone and have some sort of information,
this
that
broad
is more than
overall
random.
viewpoint
Like
of something.
when we look at someone's
And it
face
may make
and
sense
skin
there, but
color,
once you get
we
into
have
the
more than
details, it
random
shows,
genetic
it doesn't
information
work.
about where they come from. And in fact, if you look at a black person in the U.S., you can say with a somewhat very high percentage of chance of being right that they have most of their ancestors come from Africa. And given that this is true and that there is information, why would it be a problem if the information is imperfect? Why would it be a problem if
Because I
some
explained this
those are
earlier.
classified in a racial classification
Yeah.
if the vast majority can be properly classified?
Okay, as Styx pointed out earlier and Richard assented to, this is going to not only be a very messy process, but lead into purity spiraling.
Yes.
Where whatever it is, whatever the group, the movement, the nation, will start self-consuming on the basis that power will be achieved through racial purity. And that just leads you down a road that you don't really want to go down because, as Styx points out correctly, it's going to end in blood. I think it's a much worse solution to the problem of, well, anything, really.
It
All
doesn't
that-
And it doesn't
this
solve
is
the
going to be
problem.
a solution too.
Can
it
I?
doesn't seem to me
And
that the
purity
ethno-nationalists are...
spiraling into
Yeah,
anti, anyone who's not a pure Pole must be killed. Is that a problem in Poland right now?
Did I say that anyone who's not a pure Pole would be killed?
Well, you talked about violence, and I don't see the
There absolutely will be.
ethno-nationalists
The
talking
question
about purity
is purity
spiral.
spiraling necessary? I mean, sure, I can imagine a purity spiral. Sure, that's one possibility.
Well,
I can imagine a whole
many.
host of other things.
Yeah, but do you not think that that's a problem? Setting up a system
be a
that's
problem,
inherently
sure.
going to fail.
No, it's what
It could be a
what
problem,
we're
sure.
seeing
A
right
purity
now
spiral, I
of
don't think
the
so.
You're already having
Thank
these
you for
problems.
your
Yeah.
foreknowledge of history.
yeah, we're already having these
You're welcome.
problems
There
where
is
when
a
things are
You're
point.
based
already
on
having
identity.
problems in the alt-right.
All right.
That's the
Okay, so they're having these problems he mentions in the alt-right, but they're also having these problems on the alt-right, which is essentially the left, but they're also having these problems in groups like Black Lives Matter and those sorts of things. When someone is black and has a dissenting opinion or does not agree with the group, they are, there's like, oh, well, you're not really a black person. That seems, and if this was a government institution or a societal structure, as opposed to just smaller groups within a society, if this was how you got power and that sort of thing, dissenting from the group and being outcast, even though you share the same race, this would happen like on a much larger scale with what Richard Spencer wants is, oh, hey, you're not agreeing with our group? Well, you must not really be black. Or you don't agree with the group? You must not really be white. You must not be a pure white person because you disagree with what the group wants. That would happen and is happening.
I don't think it'd really be along those lines. It'd be the same end result, but I don't think it would be, oh, well, you're not really this. It'd be, well, yeah, you're white, but your political or whatever ideology is so far from what we consider the norm to be. They'd wind up bringing back political excommunication. It would have nothing to do with, oh, you're not white enough, obviously, and have everything to do with,
well,
you're a dissenter, so you need to leave.
If their society is built not on politics exactly, but on racial identity, it would have to be, oh, you're not white enough. You're clearly not white if you hold those views. That's because that becomes the core tenet of their viewpoint.
That's the problem, though, is that society, as we both know, can't be built without the political part.
Okay.
So you can say it's the ethno part all you want. You're not going to get the ethno part without the political part, and the political part is really the only thing that's going to hold it together. You have to maintain the viewpoints.
Yeah.
As a collective.
And that's somewhat what these other groups understand is they have to have they build themselves by identity, right? You're like, okay, we're all black, let's all put together, and this is our political view. Oh, we've got someone who disagrees with the political view, and they'll call them Uncle Tom, and they'll say they're not really black and that sort of thing, but they're not really changing their person's actual ethnic identity. They're just saying, but they're saying it in a different term, but what they mean is you don't abide by our political view, so you're outcast from the group. Right? So they say it's because they're not truly black or whatever, but it's what they mean is you're not abiding by our political ideology.
Yeah, you probably didn't catch it, but did you catch the Baked Alaska stream tonight with Tariq Nasheed and Jared Taylor?
Oh, really? I gotta check that out. But yeah, let's.
Yeah,
I've got about
it
2 minutes
Even
left of this.
Medicare hopped in it after they were both
nice.
gone, and they just like laughed about it. And Warski hopped in too.
All right, I'm gonna finish out the last bit of this.
You arrive at a point at which purity spiraling would be meaningless for anyone. You would arrive at a point where
you
would be unsatisfied that Richard Spencer is really right, and you'd be like, "What? To what extent does that information serve me?" And I think that what ethno-nationalists are proposing, and I hear that from Tara McCarthy, I hear that from Richard, it's that they will not engage into a purity spiral. In fact, I hear a lot of openness about having borders of diversity that are not super pure. They are very open at the idea that there would be mixed race
they always assume that they are the noble people who will be in charge, and that the evil or whatever the evil people in their movement
won't get power. I don't want to destroy the natural diversity within the white race. The fact is, there is major differences between a Russian and a Scotsman, or a Scotsman and an Italian and an Estonian. I think these differences are beautiful. I actually don't really have a problem, to be honest, when you have a mix of a German and an Italian. I think sometimes that kind of mixing of different types within the white race can produce something beautiful, actually. I don't believe in purity spirals. In terms of I've met people
but whether
who are
you believe in them or
race.
not is kind of irrelevant. They're already happening in the alt-right.
You're describing the alt-right. We're talking about the ethno-state. I mean, you're describing, yes, are there people purity spiraling on
philosophy,
Twitter?
Surely.
You're literally making this argument. People are purity spiraling on Twitter, therefore the ethno-state will inherently purity spiral into a bloodbath. That just simply does not follow. It does not follow, Sargon.
It absolutely follows. The idea that you think a political purity spiral
doesn't logically
the
follow,
country
by the way.
won't end up in people getting shot is absolutely hilarious to me.
Okay.
And no matter how how much you try to brush this off, it doesn't it's not something that's going away.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you understand formal logic?
Do you understand anything that I've said? Do you understand a word I've said? Because you literally said, I don't understand what you're saying. It's all autistic as far as I can see.
All right.
It's not very powerful.
Let me ask a question.
All right. So that's where the end of this clip goes, and that's where I'm going to end this stream. Oh, crap. What did I just do there? Did I close out the wrong window? Oh, okay. All it did is get him out of the Hangouts. Okay. Or get my stream out of the Hangouts, or the video clip stream. So the one thing I wish Sargon would have brought up, because he was talking about the alt-right and that sort of thing, and Spencer brought up, oh, so you're saying what people do on Twitter will come out into the real world and you'll see the evidence. I'm like, yes, that's what we're seeing right now. The things that happen on Twitter, yes, they sound insane, they sound beyond parody, and yet we are seeing those things enact themselves in real life when Antifa and those groups are protesting and burning down college campuses. That is what happens. So that what you see on Twitter is the surface of this. And yes, the purity spiral that you see on the alt-right, those sorts of things you would see on social media in Spencer's ethno-state or whatever, his ideal. You would see those things on social media. And yes, they would be more pronounced in social media, but then they would also start to exhibit themselves in the real world, where you would see these groups, setting things on fire or causing, political unrest in their areas, and these disgruntled people wreaking havoc based on their viewpoints. That would happen in his ethno-state. So he has solved absolutely nothing with his ethno-state. His viewpoint is not maintainable, and basing something off of something as immutable as race. And he also mentions, I think it's great when a German and an Italian mix. I'm like, well, the same mentality should apply between mixing between races. Like, yes, it should be the same kind of like, oh, hey, that's two different races start mixing whatever. You get this, you get a mixed race. You get someone like me. I got no problem with that. I don't see the issue, but Richard does see that as an issue. He's like, oh, well, Italians and Germans, fine. Italians and someone from Nigeria, oh, that's terrible. And you're like, well, you don't get a freaking say in this. Spencer, you don't get a say because that's what two people chose to do voluntarily with each other. You are not a part of that relationship. Stop trying to put yourself in between, because that's what you would have to do for your ethnostate. You would have to say, this person is Italian, that person is from Nigeria. They want to have children together, but in our ethnostate we don't allow that, so you can't. Forbidden. That's what you would have to. You would have to have something like that in his state.
Wouldn't be there.
No, he wouldn't.
The person from Nigeria would be pushed out.
Yeah, well, the Italian guy might want to import the person from Nigeria.
Well, that's just too fucking bad. That's why you'd have to have closed borders too.
Yeah, in which case, if enough people are like, oh, dude, you're stopping us from doing what we want. Your ethnostate sucks. Well, you'd either have people leaving, or you'd have people trying to change the system from within.
You could close the borders and make it so that only white people can come in, and all black people leave, all Mexican people leave, or whatever he's advocating for. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. And if, say, the black person's married to a white person, well, we don't want bloodshed, so the white person can go with the black person because the black person's got to go. Otherwise, we don't have an ethno-state. So the white person can go with them, wherever they go. And we wouldn't see the whole, thing that we have on Twitter, because how can you have people fighting about race if
no, they wouldn't be fighting about race. It would be the purity spiral, right? It's hey, you disagree with me politically, so you don't get a say in this. You don't get a say in our ethno-state. That's...
Oh, yeah. You'd excommunicate those people at the same time that you're getting...
And then you'd get a group of disgruntled, excommunicated people all fighting against the system and lashing out on Twitter and then lashing out in real life.
Well, they can lash out on Twitter and lash out on real life all they want in another country.
Well, in order to do that, Richard would have to impose tyrannical free speech laws, and he does get into that later on in this debate when he's talking about that.
You wouldn't have to have any free speech laws; they'd already be deported. They'd already be excommunicated. They'd already be
how
out the same way that the black people are. You just kick them out.
Just kick them out for their viewpoints, even though they are of the white race. So, but he was talking about earlier that people with
free helicopter rides.
Yeah, he was talking about earlier. It's a place where people could come to because of their ethnicity, where they could be allowed in because of their ethnic makeup.
Well, it'd be okay. You say you want to go to Israel, and you come from a family of 1,000 years of Judaism or Judaism, all right? But you're an atheist. They're not going to let you in. You match the ethno requirement to enter Israel and become a citizen.
How do you know they won't let you in?
Because if you're an atheist, they're not going to let you in.
Is that the laws of the land? You have to be a practicing Jew to be accepted into Israel?
Yeah, there's all kinds of forms and tests and all kinds of crap you got to fill out to enter Israel.
Okay, and so he's saying that. His statement was that if you are white, you should have the United States should act as a haven for you, you could come here. And now you're saying that wouldn't be the case. Is that...
Well, it would if you agree with the echoes of the chamber. If you don't agree with the echoes of the chamber, it doesn't matter what color you are, you're not welcome.
Well, I think what he's eventually going to have is a very low population country with very shitty defenses and authoritarian structures, and people are just going to be leaving en masse if they can. He's going to have to impose restrictions on preventing people from leaving. And now the free helicopter rides is.
They wouldn't have to. There are enough people. There's people. We would have people from Germany and.
But there's enough people with dissenting viewpoints.
Right all the other people in Europe right now that are being displaced by the Muslims.
Yeah, no. So in the United States right now. Yeah, I know you're playing devil's advocate, but in the United States right now, it's still majority white. And it's nearly 50-50 politically divided between the left and the right. Or when you're talking about on the actual elections between Democrat versus Republican. It was a landslide, or I don't even know if it technically qualifies as a landslide, but you're talking about 2% of the population determined who was president. That's how close the presidential race was. It was determined by 2% of the population.
Now. No, it was the Russians.
oh, sorry. It was 2% of the population who were brainwashed by the Russians.
yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
But so if that's the case in Richard Spencer's ethno-state, 50% of the people would have dissenting political viewpoints. So you'd have to lose half of the country if you're giving free helicopter rides to that.
You can't make an honest assessment of the country's political leanings, because unlike Australia, we do not have mandatory voting.
Yeah.
If we had mandatory voting, I would be very interested to see how the elections went.
Okay. So the people so you would lose a fourth of the country at least, and then you'd have another fourth of the country that you think would be right-leaning as opposed to left-leaning, or vice versa, or whatever political party ends up being the white political preferred or whatever.
Oh, no.
So you'd have at least 1/4 that you know are the wrong type that you have to kick out, and then you'd have another fourth that you're not sure about.
No, you're doing the math wrong. You'd have a fourth that you got to kick out because they don't meet the ethno-state requirements. You wouldn't have another fourth after that. You'd have half. You'd have half of the remainder.
Wait.
You kick out a fourth, your 75% that you're left with is now your new 100%.
Okay.
So it'd be half of the remainder, half of the 100% that's left over.
No, probably closer to 40%, because you're talking about the people who voted, right? So if you, because the people who voted in the last election was like 50% of the population.
Well, they'd have to basically.
So if you're talking about 30 million-ish people, probably more, it's probably closer to 40 million are not white in the United States. So 40 million get kicked out.
Way more than that. You got 36 million that's just black, and then you got, all the other variants that you got to get rid of.
Yeah. So, in order to reduce it down to just the whites in the United States, you're talking about kicking out like 80 million, right? Or somewhere around there, maybe 70.
At the very least, we got 360
no, it's
million right now.
320 million people in the U.S. about.
Well, I saw the projection because the last census, it's been a while.
Oh, okay.
The projection for the U.S. population for 2018 was like 370 million.
Oh, okay. So then that would kick us down to 300 million, and then of those 300 million, about 120 million voted the other way.
There's 11 million Mexicans you got to kick out that are here illegally.
Okay. So is that census talking about that population as well, or is that separate?
No, that's just separate, but I mean, they're votes.
Yeah, but
that you have to factor in.
Yeah.
But illegals can't vote. Yeah, bullshit.
Yeah, bullshit. That's why the Democrats hate the voter laws, right? Oh, I have to require ID, like a state ID. Oh, what? The only what you can't expect black people to do that. Like, what kind of low expectations do you have?
Are we still live?
Yes, we are. We are still live. At least I think so. But I'm getting close to wrapping this up, so I just wanted to get those couple last few points. But yes, that's the low expectations Democrats have for black people, and the only reason they would oppose the voter ID laws is because they don't want the illegal voters to get caught, because illegal voters are voting for Democrats. That's if you had a restriction on voters, and if you also had a mandatory vote system, then you would see
and if we had a chip. If we had a chip system on our ID cards,
which a lot of states are moving to.
Where you had to insert your ID card into the machine and then it registers your vote, you completely do away with double and triple voting as well.
Yep. All right. So that was my take on it. Thanks for staying for the 2 hours and 45 minutes. It's longer than I expected. I will be doing only one more of these. I'm going to try to get into Spencer talking about how his system, even if he succeeds in getting what he wants, it's not going to change anything, it's not going to solve anything, because he goes on to that in the debate. And there's a couple other points that I want to talk about, but I think there should only be another 15 or so minutes of the actual stream that's actually worth talking about. And then the rest of it kind of is just rehashing of what's already out there, and them kind of just bitching at each other for the most part. I try to cut out as much of that as possible, but sometimes there were sections where they were bitching at each other and there was something, worth talking about in between. So I try to cut down as much of the fat off of it as I could, but there's only so much you can do when it's mostly fat around a... Or when there's fat meat. It's more spread out, or it's more evenly spread out instead of just like clumps of fat and then meat in the middle and then clumps of fat. Yeah, it's more interconnected. Anyway, thanks for staying as long as you guys did. Check out the link below for funfair.com. That is, and for my for my GoFundMe project for that. I do have an Indiegogo for that as well. I just didn't link that in the description. But thanks for staying as long as you did. Oh, I just have been ignoring the live chat, so hopefully nobody said anything important worth talking about. Have I ever been a commie? No. Okay, so that, I remember talking about the punching a neo-Nazi, so I guess maybe not too much more was said. I guess lots of people left, because this is way too long for a stream. Occam's Razor believes in civic nationalism. What's your take on civic nationalism? My understanding is civic nationalism is nationalism with the same set of values, so race is thrown out the window. It doesn't matter what your race is as long as you believe the same values. That's something I can support. I am firmly in belief that an area or a region or a country should have a solidified set of values, and if you don't abide by those values, then why the hell are you in that country? You should go somewhere else where they do like your values. You don't try to change the values of a system, which is what the leftists are trying to do, and with all these different organizations. And that's why you get civil wars. That's why hey, instead of just creating your own set of values, just go somewhere else where those values are already there. So I am behind civic nationalism in that regard. Although there is the aspect of civic nationalism where you're talking about you need to establish a nation, a border, and all that sort of thing. And so then there's the inherent system that's going to oppress somebody. Because every government it's got a monopoly on force. It's going to oppress somebody, and it's never fails. And that government always builds upon its own power and then it ends up oppressing more and more until the people are like, okay, you're oppressing too many of us. We're bigger in numbers. We're just gonna form a revolt, and sometimes that revolt fails, and sometimes that revolt succeeds. But I think that's going to be inevitable as long as you have a national structure, which is why I think the only viable solution would be an anarcho-capitalist society where everybody has the same moral code, but that moral code is not enforced by some arbitrary governmental structure, but by the people themselves. And it would be essentially closer to a theocracy in its nature, right? But instead of it being a religion as the core of that society, it would be more of that secular morality that they talk about or that is derived from the non-aggression principle. So rather than it being a God said this and the Holy Book says this kind of theocracy, it's more like these are what we've come to understand as absolute moral values, and we all have to agree by these, and if you don't agree by these, then you're not a part of our society and get the fuck out. The stream frozen? I don't think so. At least it's not on my end. I'm not seeing anything frozen, so I'm moving on my end. Let me check the actual stream itself, right? Where's the link to the stream? Let's see. I should be able to. I'm not seeing anything frozen, so I'm moving on my end.
No, it's live.
Yeah, it's live. I can watch the preview, and it seems to be going just fine. So it might have froze for a second or so. All right, but wow. So 2 hours and 48 minutes. That's a really long stream. I'm going to call it there. Check out Funfair in the description. Try to help me out with that project if you can. I'm still hoping that we can get that launched and ready by May, but there might be I might have to roll that back slightly depending on funding. But the plan right now is still May 1st for launch. Alright, thanks for joining me, and I'm going to end. Oh, and like, subscribe, and all that other stuff that you're supposed to know how to do automatically or whatever.